This is Audible.
Diary of the Displaced, Omnibus, Books 1 through 3. Written by Glynn James. Narrated by Josiah John Bildner. Diary of the Displaced, Book 1. The Journal of James Halldon. It has to start somewhere. I have no idea where I am, and I don't know what day it is. I could guess at how much time has passed since I arrived here, but other than that, I'm lost. It was January, I think. The 8th sounds about right to me, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to write down everything that has happened so far. Otherwise, this isn't going to make any sense to anyone but myself, if it even makes sense at all. Not that I'm expecting anyone else to read this, but you never know, do you? Do I fill in the previous days with notes, or put it all in today's entry? I'll settle on that later. Thought it would seem disjointed otherwise. So here we go, I guess. 2 days ago. I remember coming round. It was dark, very dark. I could vaguely make out some shapes around me, but not much else. I was lying on something uncomfortable, or several things. It all seemed to shift and collapse under my weight. My head hurt, and I knew that there were bruises all over me. I could feel them. How I got them? I have no idea. It took a while to get over the initial panic. I scrambled around blindly, trying to find something solid in the mass of crap that was shifting underneath me. I clumsily cracked my knee on something hard and metal. It was large, maybe the size of a microwave or a television, but it was difficult to tell what it was in the dark. I nearly screamed as the agony seemed to shoot round my whole body, which was already aching from the mysterious bruises. In the end, I lay there for a long time, trying desperately to stay as still as possible, rolled up in a ball and gritting my teeth, waiting for the pain to abate. I felt my pockets, but my cigarette lighter was nowhere to be found, the only damn source of light available to me, and it had gone. I did find cigarettes, wallet, car keys, a pen, and a packet of mints, but no lighter and no mobile phone. I tried to search the ground around me, stumbling over whatever all the stuff was, but that turned up nothing. I'm certain I had a lighter and a phone. My hands were cold and numb, although the place didn't feel that cold. There was air coming from somewhere, a breeze with a chill to it that smelt musty, moldy, rank, and somehow old. Negotiating my way through the debris was slow going, but after an hour or so of crawling in the dark, I found a solid barrier. It was a wall of some sort. At least, that is what it felt like, but it was hard to tell in nearly complete darkness. I must have crawled about 100 yards in that time, and I had lost all sense of direction. I sat holding my head until a wave of dizziness passed. Exhaustion weighed heavily on me, but it was a relief to find something solid as a reference. Hopefully my eyes would adjust soon, and I would be able to figure out where I was. In the end, sleep overcame me. I don't remember it happening. I guess my body had just switched off. Total shutdown. 1 day ago. When I awoke, I was leaning against the wall, and my whole body was crying out with aches and pains. Where was I? What had happened to me? It took me a few moments to recall the last day or so. I tried standing up, but my legs were numb. I could have just stayed there and moaned, but I could see where I was now. Fear always wins, it would seem. My eyes had adjusted to the level of light. Not much, but it was enough to make things out nearby, to see shapes and shadows. Details weren't clear. All around me was a mass of junk. Twisted and broken furniture, scattered books and children's toys, all damp and rotten. A few feet away stood a monolith of a refrigerator that looked like it must have been 50 years old, its doors missing. There was something nasty growing on the inside. Endless piles of junk. I shuddered to think about what might be crawling underneath it all. Then there was the wall. My assumptions had been right to some degree. It was made of solid stone blocks and extremely old. The blocks were at least 3 feet long and about a foot tall. The material was like slate, and the rough edges felt sharp. There was no visible cement between them, just a thin groove. Those bricks, if you could call them that, had to weigh a ton. They were like nothing I had ever seen. In the limited light, it looked like the wall went on in both directions. Upwards, there was no sign of the top of the wall, or a ceiling of any kind. Just darkness. I called out a few times, but there wasn't much of an echo, only a dull and hollow sound. I was convinced that I had to be in a building of some kind. All I had to eat was the half-empty packet of mints, so I was getting hungry. They tasted strange somehow, but I put that down to my mouth feeling like I'd been chewing on sandpaper. Felt like crap, so I lay there for most of the day. I couldn't sleep, and even resting didn't make the tiredness go away. Woke up and finally felt a bit more alive. Managed to retrace my crawl through the rubbish, approximately until I found what I thought was the microwave again. Found my lighter. It was about a foot away from the microwave, under a table that was covered with broken glass. Underneath that was a pile of cardboard boxes and my lighter. Searching for it took me a while, and I had nearly given up, but then I put my hand straight on it. It didn't work. Must have run out of fuel, though it was wet, so that may have stopped the flint. Don't know. I never considered how they work. Day 3. So this is where I am so far. After 2 days of mostly sleeping in the dark and feeling ill, lethargic, and hungry, I'm nearly ready to keel over. The mints didn't last long, and they just left me feeling even hungrier than before. I know I've slept a lot, so there is a possibility that I'm actually on day 4, even 5. All this doesn't seem to matter, though. Lack of food is going to become a problem soon. My guts are churning and making some very odd noises. My lighter works now that it has dried out. Found this journal. It was stuffed into a box not far from the cardboard pile. I was so close to throwing it on the fire along with anything else I've found that is flammable, but hesitated, which I'm glad of. I decided that I would write in it instead. I used to keep a diary at home, and I wrote in that every day. Well, nearly every day. So it's nice to be able to record stuff again. My pen still works. There appear to be pages torn out of the front of the diary, so it starts in February. But since I don't know the exact date for sure, that doesn't seem to matter. So, the fire. I gathered up the pile of cardboard this morning. Yes, I know there is no way to know what time it is, but I'm referring to the early part of my waking hours as morning, just to keep me sane. There were piles of it, a lot of it, wet or rotten, scattered all over among the junk. With a bundle of it tucked under one arm, I headed back over to the wall, taking it slowly and only using the lighter occasionally just to get my bearings. It takes at least 10 minutes of sitting there in the dark for my eyes to readjust. Even with the light from the clipper, the top of the wall isn't visible, and neither are the ends of the wall in either direction. There was a decent-sized area cleared now where I had slept for the last 2 nights. I threw most of it back over the junk, as far as I could chuck it, which isn't very far, because my muscles burn in protest every time I try to do anything even slightly strenuous. The ground in here is mud and stones, so this place hasn't been used in a while. The cardboard on the top of the pile that I had made was reasonably dry and caught fire quite quickly. When it did, I was given a glimpse of something that I wasn't expecting. I stood there for about 5 minutes, trying to take it all in. To start with, I guessed that I wasn't inside a building. This place is much bigger than that, unless it's an exceptionally large building. Stretching out for probably 200 feet, there was endless junk strewn across the mud floor. It wasn't just a small pile of rubbish. The stuff went on and on, was piled much higher than my head in many places. The wall wasn't a part of a building of any kind. It was a freestanding thing, about 100 feet high, crumbling into ruin in different places. In one direction it ends about 200 feet away, collapsing into rubble, but in the other direction it goes on for what seems like forever. The light from the cardboard seems to reach a lot further than I had expected. This is good. It gives me space. Somehow, I think that light travels farther than it should in this place. I'm not certain how that works, but it's strange. Even a tiny glow illuminates quite a large area. Maybe it's my eyes? I had only just begun to get a grasp of where I was when the fire started to die out. The cardboard had burned through quickly, and as the fire started to die down, I rushed about, trying to find some more fuel to keep it going, but only found more cardboard. At least it gave me enough light and a bit more time to explore the junkyard while I searched for better fuel. There were bits of broken furniture scattered about, but most of it was rotten or wet, and I didn't think it would burn well. I piled some nearby anyway, hoping it would dry out. Does wood take a long time to dry out? I have no idea. An hour later, after 10 more piles of cardboard and an assortment of broken furniture, I found it. A pile of logs. Big ones with some of their branches still on them. Someone must have cut up and dumped the majority of an entire tree there, maybe even more than one. Fortunately, a lot of it was dry and cracked, as though it had been sitting there for a long time. I cleared a bigger space surrounding my bonfire, stacking up the smaller logs that were easy to carry at the edge of the clearing. It took another hour to move the logs to my makeshift camp. Between keeping the fire going and lugging the heavy bits of trunk, some of it was far too bulky for me to drag, so I left it where it was. I called out into the darkness again. Still no answer. I've tried this a few times now, but nothing comes back. Not even my own cries. I'm starting to think I am a long way from other people. Where could this place be? Underground? Surely this isn't under the city. You can't hide a place like this. Can you? Feeling very weak. Day 4. Woke up ravenously hungry. It's my 4th day without food or water, so I'm really not feeling good at all. I'm losing weight quite rapidly now. Thank God for that extra Christmas holiday fat. I would never have been able to lose weight like this normally. The campfire had gone out while I slept, but there was still a large pile of logs, at least enough not to run out in a hurry. Lit the fire again, and then made a torch out of a piece of furniture leg and a torn piece of cloth from the remains of a sofa. I needed to find food, and fast, so I headed further out into the junkyard with my torch in hand. The microwave isn't a microwave at all. It's this strange, seemingly solid block of metal. Well, it appears to be metal. It doesn't open. Well, not in any way that I can see. There's no door or handle or anything like that, just a solid block. I tried moving it out of curiosity more than anything, but there was no way I was going to budge it without help. I spent most of the day clearing the area near my camp. Once more, I tried to find something edible, with no luck. Day 5. Found something to drink. There was a stack of fizzy drink cans underneath the wreckage of an old wardrobe, about 60 cans of it. It's nasty, cheap cola, but at least it's wet and gives me some energy. I think that the cans are quite out of date, but even though the taste is a bit odd, just like the mints were, it still feels good going down. Stopped after I drank the 3rd can. I need to make them last. The wardrobe drawer proved useful to carry the cans back to camp. There is so much junk scattered all over the place. Makes me wonder where the hell it all came from, and who put it there. Was this some half-used underground landfill site that was long abandoned? Now that I've got a bit of energy, I've started to build a sort of temporary shelter. I need to have a base to work out of. This place is pitch black, and if I end up stuck in the middle of nowhere in the dark, with no way to find my way back to my supplies, I'm dead. It may sound crazy, staying here and setting up camp. I keep thinking that I should up and move on, keep walking. that soon I would find a way out. But there's something in the back of my mind telling me that it would be a bad idea, that escape isn't only a few hundred yards away. But what if I'm wrong? What if just round the corner there is some hidden exit that I haven't yet seen? Made a rough sack out of some old curtains I found. Still haven't found my phone. The fizzy drink is 4 years out of date. I found a readable consume-by date on one of the cans. I'll never turn my nose up at cheap fizzy drinks again. Ever. Day 6. Lots to write today, but where to start? The day began with a stint collecting more wood, breaking bits of furniture that I have found and carrying it back. I'm taking it slowly, well aware that the cans of fizzy drink are not bad for energy, but without any food, I'm not running on full batteries. I found a stack of chairs, dozens of them, all made of solid wood, and nearly new. It's bizarre what you find in this place. I used them with the curtain material and managed to make a batch of torches that I can easily carry with me. They don't burn for long, though. Kept one of the chairs to sit on. The first sounds came while I was hauling a broken sofa back to the camp, a task that is not easy while holding a torch. I was dragging it along with one hand, making my way 1 yard at a time, when I heard the sound cut through the noise that I was making. It scared the hell out of me. A howl, and quite a distance away, though it is hard to tell in this place where nothing echoes properly. It didn't sound like any dog I have come across, and I've never heard anything else howl. Do foxes howl? The sound was much too deep to be a dog, almost how I imagined that a wolf would sound. But we don't have wolves in England, do we? I don't think we do. The howl was answered by another one, this time much further away. I wasn't sure of the direction the noise was coming from, or even the exact distance. I finished dragging the sofa back to camp and leaned it against the wall until I could clear an area for it. My torch was nearly out at this point, its last flickers nearly dying as I stuffed some cardboard onto the fire. The howling had stopped. Panicking, not wanting to lose the fire, I fumbled with the torch and managed to get the fire going again. There was a lot of smoke at first, but finally it went up in one giant whoosh. There it was, 5 yards away, teeth bared at me, growling. I knew by its reaction that I was saved only by the campfire. The minute the area was flooded with light again, the creature screeched. It was a high, piercing sound, like a siren, like it had been hurt. It belted away through the junkyard, yelping to disappear into the darkness. It only took a couple of seconds. The creature moved at a speed I could only imagine. It must have been going 30 miles an hour through the piles of junk. I hate to think what it could move like on the flat without any obstruction. I'll describe it as best I can, but it's not like anything I have ever seen, and I only got a brief look at it while having what felt like a heart attack. I panicked and nearly fell on my backside into the fire as I tried to back away from it. Take a large dog, such as a Rottweiler, and mix it about half and half with a tiger or a panther. Give that a mouth of teeth twice the size they should be. Cover it with gray and brown spiky hair, and lots of what look like scars, and you have roughly what just bared its teeth at me. I would swear that there were bits of flesh hanging off of it, or its fur was all torn. The eyes, they were huge. They didn't look natural, at least not to me, they didn't. Maybe the thing is accustomed to being in the dark. I presume this from the way it reacted to the light. How something like that was developed is unfathomable. Is that the right word? There's nothing that I am aware of that is like it. It must be indigenous to this place, wherever this is. That reinforces my belief that I'm a long way from any place I know. Damn, I don't know if I'm even on Earth anymore. You read stories about people vanishing and folk tales of travel to other places, but they are stories, aren't they? I'm going to keep the fire burning continuously now if I can. I think I'm going to need a weapon. Day 7. A wrecked car has appeared about 20 feet from my camp, smashed up against the side of the wall. It's a complete write-off, and there is blood all over the torn and twisted upholstery. There are also, well, bits. It wasn't there before I went to sleep. Jammed into the driver's footwell, which is utterly crushed, is a leg. Well, part of a leg. To make it worse, the bone sticking out of the leg is perfectly flat at the end, as though it had been cut or sawn off. Yeah, not kidding you. This thing arrived without making a sound. It was just there when I woke up. I can't even tell what make or model the vehicle is. It's in that much of a mess. From the apparent damage at the front of the vehicle, I would say it didn't crash into the wall here. It's not the right shape. How the hell a wrecked car got here, though? I don't know. I noticed a smell of petrol wafting in the air, which would be great news if I could get my hands on it somehow. That is, if the tank is still intact. Petrol would be useful right now. I keep glancing at the leg and the footwell and shuddering. Managed to force open the boot of the car. It took about 2 hours, but was worth it. Inside was a large suitcase, unusually heavy and ticketed to go to Namibia, Africa. Mr. Adam Samuels. Hauled the suitcase back to the camp. I struggled, but couldn't open it. I wonder if that is Mr. Samuels' leg in the footwell. Genius. Went back to the car and carefully pulled off some of the damaged metal paneling. There are lots of sharp bits that break off easily to make cutting implements. A large piece of the frame came away, twisted and jagged at one end. It didn't take much effort to wrap more pieces of the door paneling round the thing, and some of the curtain material around the handle, tied together with cloth strips cut from the sofa. Now I've got myself a nasty weapon if the dog thing comes back. It only occurred to me afterwards that I could have cut myself badly while pulling at all that sharp metal. There aren't exactly any ambulances around here, as well as the mace, I think that's what they are called. I've managed to put together 2 usable makeshift knives using the braces between a chair leg and a large piece of sharp metal from the wreck. Before going to sleep, I used a large piece of furniture wood to pry open the side of the car so I can access the petrol tank. I've got nothing to put it in at the moment. Really, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't leaking out anywhere. It's not. The petrol smell must be from the battered remains of the engine. One last thing. It occurred to me that the dog thing was probably hungry, and a raw leg from the knee down sitting in this vehicle might bring it here again. I think I heard movement in the distance once or twice, but while I've got the torches burning and the campfire lit, they seem to be leaving me alone. I'm presuming there is more than one from the answered howls that I heard. I decided I couldn't risk it, and took half an hour to pry open the footwell with the hefty bit of wood, wrapped another piece of curtain round my hand, and pulled out the leg. Damn thing squelched as it came free. I nearly threw up, and probably would have done if I had anything but fizzy drink in my belly. Chucked it over the wall. Barely. I was so glad I didn't need a second try at it. There's not a lot I can do about the blood without wasting fizzy drink. Most of it seems to have dried anyway. As a last thought before I sleep again, I must venture out soon. But I need to know that I can survive at first. I can't stay in this camp forever. For all I know, there might be a way out a few 100 yards away. Day 8. The suitcase, when cut open, contained some men's clothing. It's all a bit too large for me, and the trousers don't fit too well, but at least I've got some clean pants on now. There are towels. All I need now is some water, suntan lotion, and sunglasses. You're having a laugh. A roll-on deodorant, so now I don't smell too bad. Can dog things smell it, though? I never thought of that before I used it. More pens, then maybe a travel guide, mouthwash. Damn, mint-flavored. Stomach is burning with indigestion from only cola cans to live on. I need to find something solid soon, otherwise I'm going to have some serious stomach problems, or worse. I think at a guess, I must have already lost 2 stone. Oh well, doctor said I needed to lose weight. I'm hungry, but somehow not as hungry as I think I should be after so many days without food. Preparation for travel inventory. Shoulder sack, slightly better fashion with bits of leather from the car upholstery now that I have something to cut with. 2 knives. Wicked, nasty dog thing killing mace. 15 torches. Bundle of curtain material to make more torches. 10 cans of fizzy drink. Cigarette lighter, still part full. Journal and pens. Small chunk of sofa foam for pillow. Small towel and deodorant. Mouthwash. Too much to carry. Okay, the torches last about half an hour, roughly. The longer ones last maybe 3/4 of an hour, if I'm lucky. So I reckon that I have something like 7 hours travel time, 3.5 hours each way. I'll have to judge it by the torches. My stomach is beginning to give me real problems now, so although I should probably leave after I've slept, I'm going to head out today. Day 9. A breakthrough. I've discovered something that might be food. I know that sounds odd, but I've never seen a 3-foot-tall mushroom before. I stood there, wasting torch time for about 10 minutes, wondering whether it was edible or not. Eventually I decided that the risk was worth it. It's a pale white color, which made me think of the mushrooms that you can buy in a supermarket. I hope I'm right. I chopped it up and stashed it in the sack. It's not heavy stuff, and there is quite a lot of it. I'm getting too far ahead, so here we go. Right, I slept again. So it's pseudo-morning once more. I need to catch up on yesterday's excursion. Again, quite a bit to write. But the first thing is I'm back at the camp. The Day 8 expedition. Hour 1. For the first hour I walked about 1/4 mile through the debris, marking my journey by rearranging junk, mainly by pulling away a pile of wood or rubble and lying out a marker pointing back to the previous one. It was slow going, but if I get lost in here, I'll be in serious trouble, even with my supplies. Although there is a lot of junk, there are also some wide open spaces between it, so I don't have to climb over junk the whole way. There's so much mashed up stuff here that it could be the rubbish dump from a whole town. Most of it is either scrap yard junk or piles of broken furniture. That's good, though. At least I'm not running out of firewood anytime soon. There's no rotting filth that I can see, so this isn't landfill refuse. Found what I can only believe is dog thing's droppings, dotted about all over the place, but no signs of dog thing itself yet. As I traveled further away from the wall, the rubbish started to thin out a bit, but there were still quite big piles of it all over the place. I spotted a damaged shopping trolley that I decided to take back with me. The wheels didn't quite work, but I thought they could be fixed with a bit of force. Hour 2. Headed further out, and at about half a mile, I reached the edge of the rubbish. It thinned out into only infrequent larger piles and odd scattered bits. I think I saw at least 5 washing machines. I abandoned the shopping trolley. It was too knackered to fix and wouldn't push straight. Plus, one of the wheels fell off. It was at this point that I found the mushrooms. They were dotted around quite a distance from where the ground was covered with scrap. So maybe they favor open areas. The biggest one that I found was about 3 feet tall and probably the same diameter across the hat. I spent a while examining it before deciding to cook it back at the camp. Hour 3. As I was wandering along trying to figure out what the hell all this stuff was doing here and hoping that I would see some glimmer of inhabitancy in the distance, I came across the most bizarre thing yet. It was sitting there in a large clearing, rubbish, and junk of all kinds stacked up around it. The first glimpse I got of it was the shape, and the eyes, or what I thought were eyes. They reflected off the torchlight, and I nearly turned to run, but it didn't move. It was about 6 yards high, 4 wide, and as long as a truck. After meeting Dog Thing, I was positive that this was some gargantuan mutant rhino, or something equally horrendous and deadly. I thought that I was about to die. Then I noticed something up on top of its head, and it looked like writing. I took one step closer. Stupid, I know, but I nearly fell over laughing at myself in amazement at what was there. Number 12, not in service. It was a London bus. I was about to walk over to it and investigate when I heard the scream. Crazy. I have been on edge ever since I arrived in this place, and the one moment I relaxed, something caught me ill-prepared. I've never heard anything that made my spine tingle as much as that scream did. It was stomach-wrenching, long, and turned into a gargling wail seconds later. For the second time in as many minutes, I nearly fled the area, but something, call it instinct if you want, compelled me to try and help. That scream was coming from something or someone in extreme distress, and I knew what I was going to do, even though every part of me said it was stupid. I ran. Not quite blindly, but barely able to see 10 yards in the darkness, my torch in one hand, newly lit only a few minutes before, and my mace in the other. The scene unfolded far too quickly for me. The fight was going on much closer than I had first thought. I had barely run 20 yards, and there they were. Dog Thing was cowering back, blood streaming from a wound in its side. Looming over it with weapons in their hands were 2 people. I had hoped it would be possible, and for a few brief seconds I felt relief. There were other people here. I wasn't totally alone. But that relief was short-lived as I ran towards the scene to help them. The stench hit my senses as I got within about 10 feet, and then one of them spun round to face me. What I saw staring out of that hooded cloak was disgusting and terrifying beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. It may have once been human, but what was left was unrecognizable enough that I was unsure whether it was male or female. Most of what was visible of the creature was either rotting or falling off. It began lumbering towards me. Its face was half missing, and I could see its jawbone shining in the torchlight, hanging on by 1 or 2 putrid strips of muscle. The cloak opened a little as it moved, and underneath I could see maggots falling out of holes in its flesh and scattering across the ground. I've seen a lot of Living Dead films, and I know a zombie when I see one, or at least what a zombie really looks like. Let's face it, you watch the films, but it never occurs to you that you might meet one in person, let alone 2. I was surprised enough that the slow, shuffling thing nearly got to me before I reacted. It tried to hit me with a broken stick that it was carrying, an improvised club. But I took a couple of steps back, waited for it to get in range, bit back the fear, and tried my new mace, ironically made to defend against the creature I now fought a common enemy with. I lunged at it, missed, and stumbled forward, nearly dropping the torch and the mace. This stuff always looks easier in the films. Fortunately, I wasn't the only one with little control over my faculties. The zombie was having a hard time turning round, so I had time to wind up and aim the second attempt. As I pulled back my mace for another shot, I was vaguely aware that yards away another violent struggle was going on between Dog Thing and the other zombie. Impact. Its head erupted into pieces, splattering the ground behind it. My arm jarred, and the pain shot all the way up to my shoulder. I stumbled backwards, the creature still staggered in my direction for a moment, but then collapsed sideways, tumbling to the ground with a wet thud. Behind me, the furious growling from Dog Thing had stopped, and silence came once more. I spun round to look, swinging my torch in front of me, realizing that I still had Dog Thing and possibly another zombie to deal with. But Dog Thing was just watching me warily and nudging the remains of the other cadaver, which it had quite literally torn to pieces. Both zombies down, and only a demon dog to deal with. We stood there, 10 feet between us, breathing heavily, watching each other. I backed away slowly, leaving it to poke around the bodies. I needed to be away from the scene. I staggered back to where the bus was and leaned against the side. It took me a while to stop throwing my guts up and get my breath back. I called out in frustration into the darkness, but only a dog and 2 smashed-up zombies were there to listen to me. Realizing that I was over my expedition outward time, I rushed some of the way back and decided to leave investigating the bus for another time. Dog Thing followed me back to camp, keeping its distance. Today, day 9, I spent the most of the day shifting some of the junk in an attempt to build some kind of wall defense round my camp. It occurred to me as I sat back at the camp that I was wrong about Dog Thing being hurt by the light. I suspect it merely frightened him. Yes, I decided to presume that Dog Thing is a male. He sat just on the edge of the light of the campfire for most of the evening, watching me warily and licking his wound. It looked a bit nasty. He's not looking at me hungrily, so I'm trying to presume that I'm not what he has planned for dinner. Facts I've learned about Dog Thing. Dog Thing likes roasted mushroom. So do I. Dog Thing isn't a living, dead thing. The bits hanging off him are just dirty bits of crusty fur. I am beginning to wonder if I have found an ally in him. I hope so. I certainly don't want him as an enemy, and sleeping might be easier with him nearby. Knowing that there are zombies and things wandering around in here doesn't set you up for a peaceful night. He doesn't smell anywhere near as rank as I thought he would. He doesn't like the campfire light. Back to the mushrooms. They don't taste that much different to supermarket mushrooms, and they come in bigger bits. I guess I will find out quite soon if they are edible or not. But for now, it feels good to have something solid in my stomach. I can't believe I have been here over a week. Day 10. I haven't slept for hours now. It may be day 11, for all I know. But I'm sticking to a day being between each sleep-ish. Thank God for Dog Thing, and to hell with zombies. I'm about to try and get a few hours sleep, but I doubt very much that it's going to happen. If it wasn't for Dog Thing, I would be dead right now. There's no doubt about that. I was fast asleep and far too comfortable with a belly full of mushroom and a warm fire going. I guess I nearly forgot about the dead things that I had fought earlier that day. The noise made me start, and I sat bolt upright, fumbling for a torch and my weapon. That same long, drawn-out moan resounded nearby, and I could hear Dog Thing having a go at something. The unwelcome and familiar sound of zombie flesh ripping, and the grating of Dog Thing's teeth was too close for my liking. He must still have been sitting nearby when they arrived. The torch flooded the area with light, and I wished it hadn't, because I could see at least 4 of them loping slowly towards the camp. Worse still, there were bits enough to account for a few others strewn about the clearing that Dog Thing had been lounging around in. They don't leave a lot of blood, just bits. I hurriedly put my torch into the fire again, stoking it frantically to try and get more light into the area. It was almost out, and I didn't have the time to lug any wood from the pile. I managed to get it going a bit more, and regretted it straight away, as the fire roared to life and lit up the entire area around me. There were dozens of them, at varying distances, all shapes and sizes, and at different stages of decay. The nearest to me was at least 20 feet away, and it seemed to be stuck in the junk. Most were still staggering, trying to negotiate the piles of scrap. I am so glad that they are slow, or I would have been overrun before I even noticed that they were coming. I hesitated for a moment. Would I be able to fight them all off? Dog Thing was doing an awesome job, but me? Not a chance. My trip out earlier proved to me that I was useless with this mace. Yeah, sure, I killed it, but only after nearly landing on my backside after my first swing. Time to run. Time to get the hell out of here as fast as I can. My kit was still packed from the expedition, so I grabbed it, and as much other stuff as I could carry, and made my way along the wall away from the camp, in the only direction that was reasonably clear. As I shuffled along through the rubbish, I saw that there was only one of the creatures in that direction. I figured that if I moved quickly, I may not even have to fight it. So here I was, tucked inside the bus with the doors all jammed shut, and Dog Thing prowling the area outside. I was exhausted. Dog Thing followed me, after sidetracking to make a meal out of one or two of the zombies along the way. I think I know now why I've not become a Dog Thing meal. He seems to have a taste for the living dead. Sick, yeah, but I'd rather it was them and not me. The zombies didn't follow me. They seemed intent on continuing into the camp. I don't know where they are heading or what has attracted them to the area, but I'm glad it isn't me. Well, I think it isn't me. They didn't follow me to the bus, so they must have had some other reason to be there. What that was, I don't know, and I don't think that I want to find out. Need to sleep now. Struggling to write. Day 11. I'm still alive, still inside the bus, and still got me a demon Dog Thing patrolling on the edge of the torchlight. Can you feel love for a mutt from hell? Damn right you can. He won't come into the bus, and it seems to be afraid of it for some reason. Maybe I should take heed of that, but I'm too tired. I'm glad I made a large supply of torches now. Anyway, back to my escape. My exodus wasn't entirely uneventful. That one zombie that I was hoping to avoid moved quicker than expected. As I edged away along the wall, it closed the gap. I looked back, but Dog Thing was busy tearing into another of the monsters that had entered his clearing. I whistled, but he didn't respond. I would have called him, but I didn't think he would answer to Dog Thing, and I didn't have a name for him yet. I must give him a name. He deserves that at least. The wall was quite low by the time I faced off against the zombie. I approached slowly, pointing my mace and my torch at it. The reek of the creature was nasty, hitting me like a cloud of gas at about 10 feet. It was a massive one, not tall or anything, but fat, monstrously fat, and it had something sticking out of its stomach, piercing right through its body. It looked like it was a metal girder or something similar. Its innards were wrapped round the metal and dangling out all over the place, dragging along the floor as it stumbled about. A totally random thought entered my head, and I laughed. How odd. Here I am, faced with a horde of the living dead, and I'm laughing as I remember being told by my mum to tie my shoelaces, or I would trip on them. Did this creature ever have a problem tripping on its own guts? For its weapon, the zombie had chosen a head. Yeah, a zombie head. It had hold of it by the hair, which was long and drenched through with dried blood and other crap. As it swung it in my direction, the head cursed and swore at me. I think that's what freaked me out more than the obese size of the creature, that swinging, screaming head that it was trying to hit me with. I didn't think I had much luck by ending up in this place, but luck has had a lot to do with my survival after that moment, and it played a huge role right then. I was about to step forward and try to take the thing on, even though I was convinced that I stood no chance. But then I noticed what it was standing on. Cardboard. Another immense pile of it, spread out across the floor, and this time not drenched in muck and water. One jab of my torch, and it took like a treat, and the giant zombie went up with it. I had to jump back a few steps to avoid getting toasted myself. I've never been a hateful person, but the sheer joy at watching that creature roast was immense. So much so that I wasn't expecting the damn thing to come walking off the cardboard towards me, burning like a failed Catherine wheel as it flailed that screaming head and its other arm around in its fury. I had no choice. I dived over the wall, hit the ground hard, and then, frantically, crawled away. Not a moment too soon, either, because barely a second or two after I tumbled away from the wall, the burning zombie came crashing down over the rock in an inferno. and fell to pieces on the cobbled floor. The head, still on fire, rolled over towards me and came to a stop a few inches from my feet. It screamed. Up until then, I had been avoiding going over that wall. I dreaded the thought that when I got there, it would be as vast and endless as the side I was living on, and there was something reassuring about sleeping with your back to solid wall. I was right to be wary. Broken ground stretched out into the darkness, and there was no sign of an ending to the open space this side of the wall. I didn't have time to look around, and I wasn't going to go stumbling into somewhere else unknown if I could help it. So I hurried off in the only direction that I could remember, towards the bus, leaving the zombie collapsed in flames with the putrid stench of rotten, burning flesh hanging in the air and tearing at my nostrils. The head screamed even worse insults at me as I scurried away. How typical is that? The first time I hear another human voice, and it's not attached to a body. It couldn't even have had vocal cords. This place is nuts! It would seem that my memory isn't completely gone. I'm starting to get some little bits back about the day I ended up here. I think I would have remembered more, but the dream that brought it to me ended rather abruptly when the zombies arrived at the camp. I was on my way to a major client to talk to them about their latest order when I hit a traffic jam. The M25 can get quite frustrating during rush hour. But it wasn't normally so congested mid-afternoon, so that was unusual. Still, that didn't suggest anything weird to me. It took about an hour extra to get there, so I had phoned ahead to let them know I was going to be late. That was when I noticed my phone was getting low on charge. I couldn't find the car adapter for recharging it, and I remember making a mental note to do so later on, but I guess that opportunity never came. The last thing I recall was stopping off at a service station to use their toilet. I have this thing, you see, call it an obsession, if you will, about not appearing untidy or being a nuisance of any kind. Turning up to a client's place and using the toilet straight away was rude. Well, it was to me. So I went to use the toilet at the side of the service station, and that's about as much as I can remember. Sometime after I used that toilet, something bad must have happened, and somehow I ended up here. Even more interesting, this bus has a rough bed laid out on the upper deck, and a whole bundle of personal stuff tucked away in the corners. Somebody used this place as a home at some point, and from the dust that has settled over most of it, I think that it wasn't recently. It's a shame, even though it's a relief to see any signs of life here that might be human, the place being abandoned for so long. Or so I presume. It's another reminder that I'm alone here. I spent most of the day hiding away in the bus, trying not to attract any more attention from the zombies, and catching up on my sleep. It was reassuring to be barricaded in somewhere for a change. Never would have thought it, but suntan lotion works okay as a makeshift soap. It's not brilliant, and I think it's a cheap brand, but it does freshen you up a bit. It's a shame there is only one bottle of it. Day 12. A few more zombies passed by this morning, but they didn't come too close and didn't bother investigating the bus. I don't think they even noticed it. Dog thing has wandered off somewhere. I didn't realize until about an hour ago that he had gone. There's something disconcerting about not knowing where he is. Gave in to curiosity and tried to start the bus, but the engine didn't even turn over. Not surprising, really. Must have been sat here for years. It's strange what you become accustomed to. After fighting zombies and eating 3-foot-tall mushrooms, a London bus sitting in the middle of nowhere doesn't seem so odd anymore. Found some useful things after having a rummage through all the stuff on the bus. There is a lot of random useless junk, like a box of dishwasher tablets, but I found a knife for starters. Yes, a real one. It's only one of those small cheese knives with a curly 2-prong tip, and it's a little blunt, but it's better than the makeshift knives that I botched together. There's also a torch, minus the batteries. You never know. I may come across some at some point, so I will keep hold of it for now. In the front corner of the upper floor was a pile of magazines, mostly gardening and craft ones. Some of them are over 30 years old. Behind the magazines was a small pile of books. 6 of them are the same book, a thesis by Professor Adler. They look quite old and are all signed, presumably by Mr. Adler himself, though I can't make out the signature clearly enough to be sure. In a pile in the middle of the floor was a thick woolen blanket that was sizable enough to cover a double bed. It's quite smelly and could definitely do with a wash, but will be a lot better than the curtain that I no longer have. Damn, I lost a lot of stuff back at the camp. Plastic bottles. There were dozens of them, all stuffed into a massive cloth sack. If only I could find some water. Fortunately, all of them were empty. Hanging on small metal hooks on 2 of the walls was a pair of lamps. They are both empty of fuel, but if I could siphon some from the car wreck, I might be able to get them going. There was also an empty hook. Covering most of the walls and windows on the top floor were posters from various time periods. Some of them were of bands from the 80s, and others that I'm certain go way back, possibly even to pre-Second World War, maybe further. I'm saving the best find until the end, as they say. On the bottom floor, right at the back among all the litter, the bottom floor must have been the last occupant's rubbish bin, was a small metal box with a broken handle. Inside it was a rusty set of tools that were mostly knackered, but there is a screwdriver, a hammer, and a rusty but usable adjustable spanner. All fantastic finds. I'm getting all happy about a damn tool set. Lingering in the back of my mind, there is an unsettling feeling that someone lived here for quite a long time, and then went off one day, never to come back. Maybe they were trapped here like me and found somewhere better, not bothering to come back? I'm not convinced of that. I think I would have come back, even if it was to collect a few things. Which reminds me, I still have to go back to the old camp and salvage whatever I can, hopefully avoiding any zombies on the way. I also need to find somewhere other than this bus to stay. There seems to be zombies wandering by every few hours. I'm lucky. They either don't seem to notice me, or they aren't interested. But that doesn't mean it will stay that way. I'm convinced that the zombies are heading somewhere. They are always walking in the same direction, and I've never seen any of them twice. Trust me, I would know. They are all grotesquely different. The strangest one I have seen so far came past yesterday, while I was having a smoke and peering out of the window, hoping to see Dog Thing. It wandered by about 30 feet away, right on the edge of the light. I'm damn sure the creature had been put together, because there were 2 heads sticking out of the top, and another jutting out of its waist. It had far too many arms and legs, almost like 3 different people had been wrapped together deliberately. The top 2 heads were staring at each other, like they were in shock from being attached to one another. Wouldn't you be? While the third, the one sticking out of its waist, was looking around. I'm not sure whether the 2 heads that were facing each other were even alive, or animate, or whatever they are. There are only 3 cans of fizzy drink left. I'm surprised they have lasted this long. Either way, I'm going to run out. This is a good thing and a bad thing. If I drink much more of the stuff, I'm going to end up with serious stomach problems. Not that I don't already have them. Fizzy pop is not good as a staple diet, but I've got nothing else. From the empty bottles, I've come to 2 possible conclusions. Either there is water nearby, or it is so far away that whoever owned these bottles needed a lot of storage to be able to live here. I'm going back to the old camp tomorrow, in an attempt to recover the last few bits of my possessions. I remember seeing a hose pipe somewhere in the junk, not too far from the camp, while I was hurrying on my way to the bus, so we'll attempt to find it. I ventured out briefly to see if I could find anything else to drink, but I didn't go too far. I did find something intriguing, though. Hidden away behind a massive pile of empty tin cans around the corner from the bus was a small heap of mangled-up bicycles and prams. None of them were in a condition to be used as they were, but it did mean one thing to me: wheels. I'm determined to fix up one of the prams to use as a cart. Then I wouldn't have to lug everything on my back. We'll pass by the pile on the way back to camp. A second reason to take a different route back there. I hope the zombies have gone. Day 13. To say that today has been an interesting experience would be an understatement, but before I go into that, I need to sort out last night's dream in my head. I hadn't even noticed until I woke up that I hadn't been having any dreams at all that I could remember. I used to dream so vividly before, back in the real world. Is that the right thing to call it? This place seems real. It's strange that I don't recall dreaming at all while I've been here, so much so that I'd forgotten all about it until last night. It started off a bit vague. Don't all dreams start that way? I was on a bus that was driving slowly through London, like the world was going through one of those film clips that they play in slow motion, so that you don't miss the details they cleverly placed in there. It wasn't as slow as a film, but the dial was definitely turned down slightly. Everyone outside the bus was walking slower, and everyone inside the bus seemed to be in complete time stop, apart from me, and one old fellow who was sitting right at the front of the bus, smoking a pipe and chattering to himself. I recognized the route the bus was taking. I'd taken it many times when I'd been working in the East End of London years ago, back when I was just learning the trade. It always worked out easier to park up and go by bus than to drive through the streets. As always on that journey, I watched the busy traffic outside and occasionally glanced down at my newspaper. The print in the paper seemed to be changing every time I looked at it, though I wasn't turning the pages. Then it occurred to me, had I been there before on this bus? On this particular bus? Yes, I had. It was a long time ago, back when I was a kid. The theater poster stuck on the top panel over the stairs. The one slightly torn in one corner was identical to the one I saw back then. I was convinced of it. I was very young at the time, and out on a day trip with my parents to the London museums. It was the exact same poster. I remember the old man getting off the bus a stop before us. He peered at me as he went by, and pointed at the empty cream soda bottle that I had been sitting squeezing the air out of, so it made a whistling sound. I remembered him so clearly because of his distinctive appearance. He was scruffy, beyond scruffy, half of his clothes in tatters, with rips and holes dotted all about him. I think his boots were held together with masking tape or something similar. His beard was long and plaited, almost like thin dreadlocks, with multicolored strings, or threads of some sort woven into the plaits. How he managed it, I don't know, but he must have been wearing at least 6 or maybe 7 layers of coats and jumpers in varying stages of disrepair. Finally, there was the hat, a baseball cap that had faded over the many years that he must have been wearing it, until it was a light shade of muddy brown. That hadn't stopped him from attaching about 500,000 tiny pin badges to it. He had the strangest face I think I've ever seen. His nose was huge and bulbous, his eyes deeply inset and smaller than I thought was possible. To me he looked exactly like I had imagined a goblin would appear, except grimier, if you could get grimier than a goblin. "You finished with that, son?" he had said, with a wink. I just stared at him and held the bottle out. I imagined that my mouth was wide open, my jaw ready to bounce off my lap. He took the bottle, winked at me a second time, and said, "You'll be fine." Then he gave me another toothy grin and shuffled off down the stairwell. I woke soon afterwards, startled by a noise outside, but the dream was still fresh in my mind, and the images overlaid reality for a few seconds. From where I was lying, huddled in the blanket, which was damn warm, if a bit smelly, I could see all the other posters on the walls. There, stuck right where it had been back then, though partially covered by a few newer posters, was the same one, ripped corner and all. Evita, starring Marty Webb. There it was, right in front of me. I sat there for a while, going over it in my head. And although I'm uncertain, I think that was how it happened. It's not all in my imagination. The noise outside repeated once more, shuffling, scratching. Brought me round in a second. I lit up the torch as quietly as I could and tentatively peered out of the window. Dog thing was shuffling about at the front of the bus, and although he only stayed for a few minutes before heading back out into the darkness, I've never been so relieved to see a mutt from hell. An hour later, and I was out the back of the bus, cooking mushrooms on a small fire. I was tempted to cook inside the bus, but if the thing went up in flames, I would be homeless. I figured I would hear a zombie coming in plenty of time. I was wrong. It was already past me and moving off into the darkness when I became aware of it, just visible on the edge of the light cast by the fire. This one was only small and carried its own severed arm in its other hand. It went on, lumbering its way past into the darkness and off in the direction of the old camp and the wall. Where were they going? I hadn't been totally stupid. The mace was leaning against the side of the bus, barely a foot away from me, and I leapt round the fire to grab it. I was still standing there, shaking and nervous as hell, thinking that the thing would come back again, when two more shuffled into the light. They were leaning on each other, or maybe one was dragging the other along. The shorter of the two had a leg dragging behind it, barely attached. They completely ignored me and followed the same path. You know what's worse than having to fight zombies? Being ignored by the damn things. It makes you wonder if you are even there. I suspect that if I wandered near them, they would probably attack me, which I'm not going to test. But the way they just carried on, ignorant of my existence, made me wonder if they sense much at all. Maybe they can't even see you unless you are right on them. It's starting to grate on me. The need to know where the hell they are all going. I know that I'm going to be daft enough at some point to follow them and find out. But right now, I'm down to 2 cans of drink. I'm surprised that I've managed to make the remaining few last this long. I want to go back to the old camp and disregard the need to head off somewhere that I don't know to find more supplies. Food isn't a problem, as there are about 1 million mushrooms growing in the dark all over the place. Water is a problem, though. Okay, I'm heading out now. Got my satchel and a few bits and pieces. Got the tools, the mace, lighter, a couple of empty bottles, one of which looks remarkably like that bottle I gave the old man on the bus, a few torches, and one of the lanterns. I decided to go for the bike and the pram pile to see if I can put together some form of trolley to move stuff in. It's right on the edge of an area I haven't been far into, with plenty of mushrooms, so I can explore a little and grab some food at the same time. Oh, and it's not near the zombie route. Day 14. Yesterday I spent the majority of the day rummaging through the pile of prams and bicycles, trying to find enough useful bits to put something together. I did it in the end, after a lot of messing about. I found an old pram that only had 3 wheels, and a single wheel that was roughly the same size. It's probably going to wobble, though. Thinking of other possibilities, I also picked up a couple of bikes and various other parts that looked usable, and pushed them along in the pram back to the bus. After a couple of trips there, I had enough bits to rig something up, and spent the rest of the day inside the bus fixing up my new contraption. I made it from 2 prams, 4 bikes, and a heap of other bits to keep it from falling apart. A pushcart. It is a thing of engineering genius and beauty. Well, it is to me. There is only 1 can of drink left. I've done well to ration them, but they don't exactly quench any thirst. If anything, they make it worse. Today I decided to go and have a poke around back near the old camp. There was an area where all the cardboard was damp, so I figured there had to be water near there, somewhere. I took a pile of empty bottles and one of the hanging lanterns. Hopefully I'd find something to fill the bottles. On the way to the wreck, I spotted the hose pipe that I had seen before. It had a few holes in it, and was wrapped round a massive stone block that looked like a collapsed part of an old building. It took a bit of cutting with the new knife to free a section of it about 4 meters long. I cut it into 2 pieces, which should be enough for siphoning off petrol, I thought. I've seen how it's done. My dad was always tinkering with his car, but I've never tried to empty a petrol tank myself before. The zombies had gone, and there wasn't even much left of the gargantuan one with the swinging head for a weapon, the one that I torched. There were small bits here and there, but the majority had vanished. I'm sure some of the bits were broken bone. Maybe Dog Thing came back and had his dinner here. After clearing out what remained of my camp, including the pillow, sofa foam, curtains, and odd bits that I had collected, such as the pile of chair legs, I wandered back over to the car wreck. It was still there, with that musty smell of petrol lingering in the air. Where I had managed to prise open the side of the vehicle, the petrol tank was in clear view. I admit that I was a little nervous holding a lighted torch over it. After propping the torch up a few feet away, I took off the petrol cap and forced the pipe down the hole. It took a lot of sucking to get the petrol flowing out, and it tasted disgusting. But soon I had a few full bottles. The lantern, once filled, lit up an area much bigger than the torches did. At last, a source of light that shouldn't run out every half an hour, I hoped. It was strange to see the old camp area and the place where I first arrived all brightly lit up. I could clearly see 100 yards or more before the bright light began to recede. After a bit of clambering about, I found a decent piece of metal pole and attached it to the pram, with ripped bits of curtain pointing upwards. A couple of whacks from my mace, and there was a hook shape on the top to tie the lantern on. Another strip of the curtain sorted that out. The damp area where I first found the cardboard, a few feet from the spot where I first woke up, was as dry as the rest now, and I couldn't find a reason for it being wet in the first place. Something I hadn't noticed while I was living out of that camp was a mountain of books and newspapers, about 100 yards along the wall, in the opposite direction from where I made my quick exit a few days ago. I pushed the cart over to it and had a rummage in the pile. There had to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of books and magazines in the pile. I grabbed a few of the least damaged ones and stacked them on the cart before moving on, promising myself that I had to come back and have a proper look. If I was going to be stuck here, I may as well have something to read. It was so much easier to spot useful things with the area lit up almost as bright as daylight, but that also meant I kept seeing stuff that would definitely come in handy. Far too much of it to carry at that moment. Damn it! I was becoming a bag lady. One interesting thing that I did spot was half a dozen sacks filled with empty drink cans, the same ones that I had been living off. Unfortunately, there weren't any left unopened. Had someone else sat here drinking them all? Dog Thing hasn't shown his face again since he popped back to the bus yesterday. I wish that I knew what he knew. He's probably lying in a huge pool of water somewhere, drinking his fill and frolicking on the shore. If only he could talk. I bet there would be an endless amount of interesting things he could tell me, having lived here all his life. I still wonder what exactly he is, and how he got here. As I headed out to the mushroom field, I spotted the oddest thing. Scaffolding. I don't mean piles of it. The stuff was already erected, and sitting there in the middle of an immense clearing in the junkyard that was close to the wall. Some of it was hanging down, ready to collapse, but most of it was standing quite sturdy, ramps, ladders, and all. The only thing that was missing was the building in the midst of it all. There wasn't time to head over to it and investigate. I needed new supplies. I set off again, pushing my cart back towards the mushroom field. Sometimes it just doesn't click, does it? Then later on you have an epiphany and feel damn stupid because you didn't put two things together. Mushrooms. Where do they grow? In the dark, with little light, in the damp. I was busy cutting up my third mushroom, standing in what looked like an endless field of the things. They stretched out as far as I could see, so I wasn't going out into them. I'd have gotten myself lost. Then I felt something tap me on the shoulder. I spun around, dropping both the mushroom and my knife. My heart almost slipped out of my throat. That stunned, tingling feeling you get when you jar an elbow or knee on something shot through my whole body. There was nothing there. Only more mushrooms and darkness. I was alone. The mace was in my hand in about a millisecond. Well, maybe not that quick, but I was fast. It was a good job that I wasn't holding the lantern, or I might have dropped it and wound up standing in complete darkness. A minute went by, and then I felt it again. But this time it was on the top of my head. A drip. In the utter silence of this never-ending void, I heard a sound that nearly made me jump up and down with joy. It was only a faint noise, barely audible, but it was there. The pattering sound of rainfall. Day 15. Catching rainwater is not an easy thing to do. I spent the remainder of day 14 hunting down bits of plastic and sheets of anything that I might be able to use to catch the water in. Eventually, I dug some holes in the sparse layer of soil that is like a crumbly coating on the rock floor. I straightened out what little bits of plastic sheeting I could find in the nearby rubbish, making small reservoirs. Then I waited for the water to collect. An hour later, and I managed to fill one bottle of water up, which I drank down in about 3 seconds. It was fantastic, but there wasn't enough of it. After some more hunting and more digging, I eventually managed to cover a large area of ground with little potholes for the water to collect in. I'd have to come back after I'd slept and hope that it had worked. I had another strange dream last night. I was still on the bus, sitting watching the traffic and the throng of people on the streets of London. But this time I was the only one on the bus. I didn't look downstairs at the driver's booth, mainly because I had an eerie feeling that it would be empty. The journey seemed to last for ages, but then I guess it would if you were sitting there with no destination. I had no idea where I was going or where I was supposed to be getting off, so I sat there. Then I fell asleep, within the dream, which was odd. In the dream within the dream, I was watching the old tramp again, but this time he wasn't in London, not even on the bus. He was here, walking among my mushroom patch, past all of the now full, little water pits I had built. He didn't seem aware of them, though. He appeared preoccupied with something else, something I wasn't privy to. He was wandering slowly through the mushrooms. Although it might sound strange, I think that he was singing to them. He held his arms outwards and his palms flat. A mumbling sound, like a hum of an electricity generator, was coming from his throat. He walked on, and I was trapped in my camera view of his journey through the mushroom field, which ended after about a half-mile later, after passing some particularly huge mushrooms that must have been 10 feet tall. Along the way I noticed wooden shafts jutting out of the ground with pieces of bright cloth tied to the top. The tramp seemed to be using them as a guide through the mushrooms. After the mushrooms ended, the ground was hard rock. No crumbly soil coated the flat plane of ground that he walked over. I couldn't take my eyes off him. My gaze was fixed on his back. I tried to look around me, but my head wouldn't turn. I was only allowed to look in the direction that he was facing. The expanse of flat rock went on for the best part of a mile before the ground once again turned to soil. I suspect it was much further, but that was the distance that my brain registered. Now the land sloped downwards, and for the first time my vision was released. I realized then that I hadn't been seeing by the light of a torch. I wasn't even there to be carrying one. I was floating, disembodied behind the tramp, and he wasn't carrying any form of light source. Instead, the area was lit by the glow that now came from the scene in front of me. Where the flat rock plain ended, a valley spread out below us. Wild slopes covered in strange glowing grass, and even stranger plants spread out before me. It was hard to judge the distance to the far side, where the rocks were sharp and jutting upwards into what appeared to be a rock face. It looked like a natural rock wall rising for hundreds of feet from the valley floor, and lit up by massive stalactites that were formed from a strange blue, translucent, glowing, glass-like material. There was a waterfall cascading down into the valley, and white foam splashed off the rocks as the water fell from the darkness above, to end in a roaring swirl in the middle of a crystal-clear lake. It was beautiful. My gaze went back to the old man as he made his way down to the water. I noticed for the first time that a body lay barely 5 feet from the water's edge. I followed him down the slope and glanced down at the body. It was him, or what was left of him. Something terrible had happened to him here. Apart from his face, which had enough features remaining to make him recognizable, the rest of his body had been torn apart and spread out across the area in a frantic and random pattern. I guessed that something had literally ripped him apart. I turned to the other old man, the same but living one, to find him looking back at me. His eyes were brimming with tears. He spoke, and his words were the last part of the dream that I remember before I woke up.
"Wake up."
I had to find out. I had to go there. It was probably quite a journey. I don't remember the exact passage of time from the dream, but it didn't matter. I had to find the valley. I didn't remember looking at it during the dream, but when I went over it in my head, I was positive that there was a building, a shack of some sort, up on the rocks on the opposite side of the water. There was a wagon, a long pile, and other vague features that I had forgotten or were blurred, as many things are in dreams. Someone lived there. I don't know if it was the old man, but if the place still existed, I was going to find out. But not without being prepared first. I spent the whole of the day getting my supplies together, packing whatever I thought that I would need into my cart. I hauled out the sack of bottles and made some alterations to it so that it would hang comfortably off the front of the cart. I collected more wood and made more torches until I ran out of the curtain material. By the time I was finished, there was a pile of torches, enough to last me a few days if the lanterns ran out. A trip out to the mushroom patch later on rewarded me with 12 full bottles of water. I drank 2 of them down right away, relishing the feel of real water running down my throat. No more cheap cola for me. I'd kept a lookout while walking there, hoping to spot more plastic sheeting or anything that might collect water. Nothing jumped out at me. After chopping up another mushroom to take back with me, and checking that all my makeshift water collectors were set up properly, I turned to head back, but couldn't help but stop and look out over the expanse. Somewhere through those mushrooms I would hopefully find some that were 10 feet tall. If I did, I would know that there was a chance that everything else I had seen in the dream was true. As I go to sleep tonight, I am full of the first hope that I have had. There's a place out there. I'm certain of it. It's a place that has light and water and grass. There was grass. Of course, in the back of my mind, I remember the body on the shore, torn to pieces. Somehow didn't worry me. I was under constant threat wherever I was in this place. Day 16. I didn't sleep as well as I would have liked to last night. But then I wasn't expecting to. I lay awake for a long time last night, wondering whether I should set off right then. Eventually tiredness took me into slumber and yet another dream. This time I was sitting on the bank of the lake, and the old tramp was sitting next to me, staring into the mirror-like surface of clear water.
"I told you that you would be fine here, didn't I?"
His voice was harsh and cracked. His gaze cast out over the lake to something that I couldn't see.
"You will be fine here."
Where is here? Was all that I could think of among the multitude of questions that I really wanted to ask.
"I wish I knew exactly. I have been here a long time, as long as I can remember. My life back in the old world seems to be a vague memory, and one that fades a little more each day. Home is all I can say. This place is my home. Was my home."
What happened to you? Was that you on the lakeside?
"Yes, again, I wish I knew."
But you are still here.
"Yes. It would seem that even in death, I am still trapped here, though that is a comforting thing. After so long here, I would not choose to leave. It is a dangerous place, but if you can adapt as you have done, it is also a wonderful place.
Dangerous? Like the zombies and the dogs?
Yes, and far worse. The zombies, as you call them, are only dangerous if you approach them. They are tormented enough with their own inner pain that they do not wish to be reminded of how whole you still are. The dogs, the maw, are no danger to you. If anything, they are a gift. Do not fear them.
But something killed you.
Yes, there are other things here. Things best avoided.
What things? I didn't get an answer. Instead, I felt myself drifting away from the scene. My body was no longer a barrier to hold me. My mind raced back to the bus where I lay sleeping, a million questions still unanswered. Before I awoke, I heard his voice one more time.
You must find your way here, James. Find your path to the lake. You must leave soon, for after the rain will come the storm. Leave as soon as you can. I will be waiting for you.
The first thing on my list of things to do was to head back to the old camp, to the car wreck, to siphon off as much of the petrol as I could in the couple of hours that I had spared myself. I figured that I might not have the opportunity to come back here, at least not without a long trip, and the petrol was something that I didn't want to run out of soon. Torches were all very well, but there was nothing like the light of the lanterns. The trip was surprisingly quick, with not a single sign of a zombie anywhere. It was disconcerting to be wandering the place to find nothing. I was on the edge the whole way, expecting to hear that stomach-turning groan in the darkness. No movement. Not even Dog Thing, whom I am starting to miss. 10 bottles of petrol filled later, and the tank was empty. I had made such a lot of ground in a short time that I wandered back via the book pile, and had a bit of a rummage through it. Most of it was damp from the rain, and moldy from sitting outside, but I found a few readable books and magazines. A lot of it is ancient. Then back to the bus to take as much as I could carry in the cart. Tools, lanterns, mushrooms, the hose, everything that I thought would be useful that would fit on it. By the time I had stacked everything up, the cart was quite heavy. I only hoped the wheels would hold out for the journey. With some reluctance, I finally set off, saying goodbye to the bus as it disappeared from view. With my temporary home left behind me, I turned the cart toward the mushroom patch, and the journey that awaited me. I had only gone 100 yards when I saw movement in the gloom ahead. I prepared myself, mace in one hand and knife in the other, and I watched and waited. The shape moved slowly out into the light, becoming Dog Thing. He padded towards me, and then sat down about 20 feet away, glancing backwards in the direction that my journey would lead me. "So, you are called a maw, then?" I don't know what I expected back from him, but he replied in his own manner. He shuffled, stood up, and gave me what was almost a nod. Then he made a quiet, whining noise before sitting back on his haunches. I hauled the cart into movement again. It was heavy to get started, but once you had momentum, it moved quite easily over the dirt ground. As I got closer to Dog Thing, he stood up and skirted round me, keeping his distance for a moment before he began to trot alongside me. "You're coming with me, then?" A snort was my answer. It seemed he was. He was still an odd thing to have around. But, remembering the old tramp's words, and the times that Dog Thing had already helped me, saved my life even, gave me a boost of confidence that I had been missing since he disappeared a few days ago. Any companion was good in this place, especially one with the killing ability of a demon mutt. We set off across the junkyard, heading slowly past the massive piles of refuse that I wished I had time to sort through a bit more. I was convinced that there was endless useful stuff in there. Eventually, the mushroom patch was in sight, and it felt a little strange to be pushing the cart through it, towards my water reservoirs, with the thought that I might not be coming back this way again, at least not for a while. The first sign that the dream was living up to its promises was the pools of water that had gathered in my pothole reservoirs. All of them were full, and it took me a while to fill all the bottles that I had stored in the sack, making the cart even heavier to push. By the time I had filled them up, collected the plastic sheets, and begun my journey again, I was starting to feel the tiredness come over me. The latter part of the day had gone by much quicker, and although I had no way to judge the time, it certainly felt like I had been awake for a full day. I pushed on further and into the mushrooms, struggling with the extra weight of water that I was now carrying. I hadn't traveled more than a few 100 yards or so when I spotted the first marker. It was the same wooden pole that I remembered the tramp following, and had the same bright cloth tied neatly at the top. As I sit here writing this journal and eating some of what I had already cooked yesterday, shaded from the rain by a massive mushroom, one that is 10 feet tall like I had seen in the dream, and an hour on from finding the first marker, and 10 more markers past, I am hopeful for the future. Dog Thing is sitting barely 10 feet away from me, also eating, though his is raw and bitten straight from the mushroom. His presence is a constant reminder of how strange this place is, but also how not everything is against me. I think of the lake and the shack up on the rocks, and I know there is somewhere to go at last. It's a place not far from here, and though it is no longer inhabited by the living, it is a place that could be lived in, for now. It's a place where an old tramp, who I once met on a bus when I was a child, once lived. One that talks to me in my dreams. Day 17. So, who was he then?
He was a professor, taught art literature, I think, but he was quite mad when I met him down here. He was a nice fellow, harmless enough, but he used to gibber on in some strange language, and he talked to himself a lot.
And he just disappeared?
Yes. Well, no, not literally. One day he was talking about needing to go and get food. I said that we had enough mushrooms and pods to last us for months, but he didn't want pods or mushrooms.
Pods?
They grow by the lake. You will see when you get here. They taste like potatoes, but with a sharper taste, maybe, and are much bigger. They are slow-growing, though.
I see. Anyway, about Professor Adler?
Yes, oh, yes. Well, he packed up some provisions, got on his bicycle, and headed out across the swamps. He used to travel round a lot before, but this was different, somehow more final. I begged him not to go, but he didn't listen. He never came back.
Swamp?
It's a few miles past the valley. There are some ruins as well. A city, once, I think. It's a dangerous place. I'll tell you all about it when you get here.
What's your name, anyway?
Rudy.
It was strange waking up outside again. The rain hadn't stopped. It still floated down in a barely perceptible sheet, the kind of rain that soaks everything, while giving you the impression that it's just a light shower. I was glad of the huge mushroom that I was sitting under. The ground near the base was almost dry. A few feet away, and the ground was sludge. Dog Thing had found himself a similar nook to hide away in, tucking himself under a smaller mushroom about 20 feet away. He was so well camouflaged in this strange field that I almost didn't spot him. I decided that it was pointless waiting until the rain eased. It hadn't done since it first started drizzling. I spent a few minutes gathering my things and pushed off out into the wet, trying to spot the next marker. It was a slow trek through the rest of the mushrooms and up onto the rock plateau. I didn't remember the slope out of the mushroom field being quite so steep in the dream, and it took me about an hour to haul my cart up the few 100 feet of rock. When I finally got up there, it was the weirdest sight. Talk about flat. The plateau could have been carved by a machine from the bare rock. There was almost a polished sheen glimmering in the lantern light, stretching out for the few 100 yards of visibility. Dog Thing seemed reluctant to follow me out onto the flat at first. He perched on a small outcropping of rock at the top of the slope and watched me, eventually leaving the safety of his camouflage to catch me up. I'm glad he did. Seeing him sitting there watching me go gave me an eerie lack of confidence in my choice. If he wasn't willing to walk there, what was I doing? The markers were less frequent across the rock, and each time they were sticking out of a plastic bag filled with small stones and bits of junk. The hard surface of the ground looked like marble, but less smooth. Of course, I'd only ever seen marble on the floor of banks and museums where it was highly polished. This must have been marble in its raw state. I could have been walking over a natural resource worth a fortune. One thing I did notice was the long streaks of reddish gold. I thought that they looked like metal of some kind, but I could have been wrong. What the hell did I know about rocks? Dog Thing stayed a lot closer to me than usual, snuffling along the ground a few feet behind me and hugging the shadows that the lantern cast. He seemed okay, but a little uncomfortable. I reckon it took roughly 8 hours to reach the crevice, and I was about 4 hours into the journey when the rain stopped. No warning, no light rain or gradual lapse. It just switched off, like someone had turned the tap off. 20 minutes later, and I was walking on dry ground. I had no idea where the water had all gone. The crevasse appeared in the gloom, stretching across the path that the markers had led me along. I had a horrible gut feeling as I approached that it was going to be impassable. It appeared to be about 30 feet wide and dark. When I finally had the chance to look down into it, I sighed with relief. It was only deep as a man's height. Of course, there was no easy way to cross it, and no gradual slope, just a sheer drop. Well, it's another hour or so later as I sit writing this. I've got a little campfire going down in the crevasse, only a small one to cook up some mushrooms. It took me most of that time to haul my stuff out of the cart and down into the bottom. Then I had to lug the cart down as well. At first I left the cart and walked a little way along the edge, hoping that it would end soon, so that I might be able to navigate round it. But there wasn't any sign of an easier crossing, so I gave up. I could have spent hours walking along it to find something. My stomach is still feeling crap after 2 weeks or so of drinking only cheap fizzy pop. I'm hoping that drinking water will make a difference, clean my system out a bit. Having solid food seems to be helping a lot. Now that the rain has stopped, I'm wishing that I'd laid out more plastic water traps on the way. At least I still have quite a good supply of water bottles. Day 18. How far is it?
Not far. Maybe a day or so from the crack in the plateau. You're making good time.
Okay.
The rains have stopped, haven't they?
Yes.
The maw is still with you?
Dog Thing?
You named him? Ha ha ha. Yes, him.
Yes, he is still with me.
Good. Pay attention to his senses. The gargants don't usually move up onto the plateau, so you should be okay.
Gargants? What the hell are they?
Huge things, vicious. They come from the swamps after the rain. If the ground starts shaking, then you run in the opposite direction and hide fast. But don't worry, you'll be okay on the plateau.
No zombies?
No zombies. They seem to frequent the junkyards and the ruins, cutting a path straight through the swamp to make their way to the great wall that you found up there, though they take the long way round the plateau for some reason. I've never seen one up near the waterfall.
Are they really zombies, those things?
No, not really.
Dog Thing was even more on edge for the most of the day. I pressed on for as many hours as I could, leaving little time to write this by the time I set up camp again. Honestly, it's all just flat rock, so not much to report anyway. Endless flat rock. Day 19.
It was nervous?
Yes. He stuck close to me by the cart for a few hours, and he kept watching the darkness and stooping low. He wasn't a happy dog.
No ground tremors?
No.
Good. Keep going. You'll reach the valley soon.
I'll be glad to get there.
I'll bet. Be careful when you get here, though. On rare occasions, a gargant wanders up from the lakes and drinks from the waterfall pool.
Lakes?
Yes, lakes.
He was right about arriving soon. Later that day, after hours of pushing the cart, the edge of the plateau dropped off out of sight. Dog Thing reacted before I even saw the terrain change. He bolted towards the darkness and almost disappeared before the flat rock gave way to grassy slope. I had seen the points of blue light for a while in the distance, but until we got closer I couldn't make out what they were. I'd suspected correctly, though. It was the crystal stalactites from my dreams, and as I approached the edge of the valley, my eyes adjusted to the new light. The vastness of it all was overwhelming. The valley spread for what seemed like miles. The sound of the waterfall cascading down the rocks was quiet and muffled. Sound doesn't seem to travel as well as light does in this place. It's also odd how the light seems to deaden off at a distance. Only the blue light of the crystals travels far. The darkness is almost like a fog. I found Rudy's body down by the water's edge. It was exactly where it had been in the dream, but it wasn't the same. Where before there had been skin and bits of body and blood all over the place, now there were only dry old bones, most of which had become submerged in the mud. He hadn't died recently. The old shack was there, up on the rocks, not far from the waterfall. It was quite a trek up the path, which I think must have been worn away by water rather than been cut. The rock was too smooth. Rudy was waiting at the entrance to the building, near where the door was flung open and hanging half off its hinges. A strange, warm wind was gusting across the rock as I hauled the cart up the slope. After everything I had seen in this dark world, even with the zombies, apparently not zombies, and Dog Thing, and the mushrooms, seeing a floating, glowing ghost of a dead man was still quite disturbing. I was wary as I approached, but he was smiling and beckoning me forward.
You made it. Good. Come on, quickly. Get inside before the gargant smells you.
He pointed behind me, beyond the waterfall. I turned round, looking down the valley, and saw the creature he spoke of. The gargant was close by, and the name was quite apt. I'm not sure what it was that I was expecting to see, but I know that a giant slug thing wasn't it. From my best judgment, given the distance, it was easily the size of a bus, maybe larger. It shuffled on a multitude of tiny legs that lined the bottom of its body, and hundreds of tentacles writhing across the ground in front of it, as it scoured the river bed and the grass near the lake's edge for, well, whatever it was looking for. Mad.
Yes, exactly. Nasty things. Fortunately, they can't get all the way up here. The rocks don't give them enough perches to climb, but they can get part of the way up, and have wrecked the lower end of the valley before killing all the pods that grow there. Come inside. Let's not give it any reason to come any further upstream.
I left the cart on the flat, rocky area in front of the shack and went in, following my ghostly friend. I noticed that Dog Thing had disappeared again, and Rudy must have sensed my thoughts.
Don't worry, it will be back. The maw seem to love gargant spawn, and they are far too quick for the gargants to catch.
My stomach churned. Gargant spawn?
Eggs. They leave piles of them in the mud. Easy for Ma to dig up. Best not to think about it.
The shack looked long abandoned, but the rough stone fireplace, the only part of the building not made of wood, was stocked up and ready to be lit.
I made the fire before I went to the lake that last time. It's been sitting there, ready, for years.
It took a while to get the fire going. Some of it was damp and moldy, but after removing the worst of it, the fire took well. Soon the shack was lit up and warm. Rudy showed me round. commenting on many of the things in his house. There were only 3 rooms, the main living room, a small bedroom, and a storage cupboard at the back that stank of rotten food. It would take some cleaning up, but with a little work, the place could be livable again. In the main living room there was an old sofa, a small desk pushed in one corner, and a bookshelf crammed full of old books and papers.
The professor's diary is in there on the top. I read it a while after he left. I felt guilty, but I wanted to know what he was thinking. You may want to read it. It's strange, but it explains a little about why he was mad, I think. The bits from when he was in London weren't that interesting, but the few entries he made when he moved to the country are.
I nodded, moving on to look at the large grandfather clock stood in one corner, motionless. The time was stuck at 4:30. Dust caked the top, and the glass and the wood was dry and cracked. It was still a beautiful thing, though.
It stopped working a while after I died.
His voice was quiet.
It needs winding up every week or so. The chimes don't work, but the tick of the clock is nice.
He was silent for a moment.
It could do with cleaning up a little. I never got round to restoring it properly. Didn't have anything to clean it with. Would you mind winding it up? It's the turnkey at the back.
I did as he asked, and started the pendulum swinging. Soon the quiet tick-tick of the clock broke the silence.
I used to sit in here a lot reading. Adler liked to walk a lot, but I preferred to stay in here. The sound of that clock was quite relaxing.
The professor didn't stay here much?
Yes, he did, most evenings anyway. He spent most of the day wandering, and he slept outside. Up the slope behind the shack, a short way, is an overhanging in the rock. He had a camp there. There's not much there now, though. I brought most of it back down here after he left.
I see. I'll have a look up there later, after I've got my stuff in here. Searching through the bookshelf, I could see it held mostly classic old tales and several copies of the same thesis book by the professor, duplicates of the books I found in the bus.
There is a mountain of books of all kinds, mostly rotten, over in the junkyard. You've probably seen it. I used to pick some up whenever I went back there, hunting for stuff. He pointed at the bookshelf. That's where most of this came from.
Later that day, I did read the professor's diary, at least the last few entries that he had written before he arrived in this place. I decided to put the pages inside my journal in case they become useful at some point. Professor Adler's Diary. Below are the last entries in the diary of Professor John Adler of Temperance, Northamptonshire, before his arrival in this other place. March 20th, 1922. It is the first day of spring, and it is a time of the year I always love. The snow, which back when I was a boy would still be melting even now, is long gone. I think the weather must be changing over the years. As I walk the lanes of the country, which I love to do in the afternoon, now the weather is turning finer. I see all the first signs of the year to come. The flowers are beginning to bloom. Small animals are flitting about, collecting food and materials to build their little nests with, and there's that crisp, pungent smell in the air. It is nice, at least, that the weather has turned, so that I may take a break from writing my memoirs. They are a joy that I would not set aside for long, but it is, as I heard some of the younger, modern-thinking artists say at my last seminar, nice to get out. It occurred to me today while I was passing one of the paths that jut off the lane that I walk, which winds round the lake, that I had never ventured aside from my regular route. There are numerous small pathways that twist and turn away from that thin road, leading to wherever they may go. I was gripped with an urge, one which I must say I resisted for the moment, to start this year's walking with something daring. I was infused with the thought of venturing somewhere new. I must consider this during my evening musings. March 21st. There are swans on the lake today. Glorious and majestic creatures they are. I was gifted with the most wondrous treat when I bore witness to two of the mightier specimens furiously debating the right to the attentions of one of the females. They were indeed noisy and abrupt. It was most impressive. During my walk, I fulfilled a little of my intent to venture forth and experience a new journey when I found a likely and interesting path. I took it upon myself to walk but 300 full strides along it, before inhaling the view, and then returning whence I came, with a promise to venture further the next morning. It was spontaneous, even though the intent was premeditated. I know that sounds strange. I wasn't expecting to find a good candidate. This particular lane was one that I couldn't recall seeing before. The lane was long and winding into the distant fields, very enticing, and I was suddenly elated, joyous even. What an excellent idea this was! I thought it would make a nice walk if I started out early enough. I will do this tomorrow. March 22nd. I started out 10 full minutes earlier this morning for my walk, following my usual route around the lake, and not stopping for any distraction that might place itself upon me. When I arrived at the path, I estimated that I would have at least an hour to venture this day. My diary entry will be short to give me extra time. March 23rd. On my third visit to the path, I have found a wonderful spring running down the slope of a small hill. Because the flask in which I carry my tea was empty, I decided to sample the water from the stream. It is quite an unusual find, and the water is exceptionally clear. I tried it in my tea in the evening, and it has a wonderful mineral tang to it, quite unlike anything I have tasted before. I must return for another sample tomorrow. March 24th. I have made an interesting discovery along the lane this day. About a quarter of a mile long, which is indeed a long walk, there is the most exquisite chapel. It resides on the side of the hill. A short walk along one of the paths that leads off this new road that I am walking each day. Behind the chapel, which seemed quite deserted and unused, is a small graveyard with some amazingly old gravestones. I only managed to investigate a few of them, and there are at least 3 dozen other. The dates that I saw were 1722 and 1728, so extremely old and intriguing. I have decided this evening that I will just for the day postpone my memoirs and make a whole day of it. I have made sandwiches and selected 2 ripe apples, and found my old walking satchel to take with me. I think it will be an interesting day. Once more this morning I filled a flask with water from the spring for my tea this evening. It adds a wonderfully sharp taste to the tea that is both subtle and lasting. March 25th. I had the most interesting experience this day. While sitting on the bench in the graveyard, one moment the day was clear, with barely a cloud in the sky. Then the next moment the sky changed. It seemed as though it happened in an instant. Above me were dark thunderheads, and a chill wind blew across the hills. I'm not sure if it was something that I am coming down with, but my vision felt blurred for a moment, and shadows inside the chapel and the stones shifted slightly, giving me a slight dizzying feeling. I rubbed my eyes and looked back up, and everything was as it should be once more. The sky was clear, and the sun was smiling down upon the hills again. I thought that it was strange for the weather to change so quickly. I am unable to explain what caused this strange vision. If that is what it was, I am certain that it was merely a moment of sickness on my part. I have taken to using the water from the spring in my lemon drink before I retire to my bed, as well as my lunch and evening tea. I have found that I feel much more invigorated in the morning when I awaken because of this. March 26th. The oddest thing happened during the night. I had what I can honestly say was a lucid dream. It must be the purifying effects of the water. I am sure of it. In the dream I was up at the graveyard on the hill, and talking to a fellow that I couldn't see clearly. I'm not sure of all the conversation. My memory of it is fading, even as I write this diary entry. I do remember the fellow trying to convince me that there was a better way to lead my life, a purer way. It was almost as if he was like one of those door-to-door peddlers I used to tire of when I lived in the city. Thank heavens I moved to the country. I remember one other thing about the man in the graveyard. He had a terrible smell about him, and I think maybe he hadn't washed for a long time. I woke with terrible headache, so am going to give my walk a miss today. It looks terribly dreary and dark outside. The weather has taken a turn for the worse, I would guess. March 27th. Some strange things are happening. The weather changes from a bright sunny day to a misty, stormy half-light. It does this now regularly and far too quickly. I worry about what may be causing this terrible change, and what we may have done to our world. Last night, as I lay in my bed, I swore I heard noises outside, someone in great pain, but when I shone my lantern out of the window, there was no one there, not even a sign of any passage. The blurred vision has returned once more, but this time with a vengeance. The strangest thing is that I believe that it may be weather-dependent. When it is sunny outside, my vision is as normal. But then, when one of the sudden weather changes occurs, many things seem blurred. As before, this is accompanied by headaches and dizziness for a moment before it passes. March 28th. I had another dream last night. In this one, the very same fellow I spoke to in the graveyard came to my home and was sitting in the study talking to me. I remember asking him to leave, and he said the strangest thing. He insisted that he lived here. Of course I scoffed at this, and I told him that he was being ridiculous, but he insisted that I was the intruder. The dream took a strange turn before I awoke. I finally got to see who I was talking to, and it was me. Except this version of me was not well at all. It must be a manifestation of my worries about the strange symptoms I am suffering, because this version of me was disfigured and had what is best described as bits missing. It was quite disgusting. I do hope that this is not some spiritual warning of a fate that may come. Outside, everything is gloomy and cloudy for most of the day. I did take a walk up to the spring to replenish my supply. I think if it were not for the spring water, I would feel much worse. March 29th. I am determined that I will make an appointment with the doctor. My vision is playing up terribly. This afternoon, while the weather was furious outside, I began hearing the most terrible noises. It must be a deficiency of some kind, for the dizziness came, and my vision went blurry. Then I heard the screaming. It was a terrible, terrible haunted scream, one of pure torture, and obviously it was completely in my imagination. I ate cheese this morning with my toast, so maybe that has affected me. I wanted to write it in my diary immediately, but I couldn't for the life of me find the damn thing. And then the oddest thing happened. The sun came out once more, and there it was, my diary and pen, right where they always were. I must have missed them completely during the feverish moment that had now passed. March 30th. The storm last night was ferocious. The episode with my diary occurred yet again today. I am beginning to question my sanity. It was missing for most of the day while the bad weather and those terrible voices assaulted my senses. I shall walk down to the village in the morning and see Dr. Halldon. This can be tolerated no more. March 31st. Terrible storms. Diary is only there for moments. Dizziness gone somehow. Can't sleep, but tired. Strange smell. Can't rid of. April or May. No clue of date. Is still April? Legs ache. Finger has fallen off. Can't understand. Must find food. Cannot leave. Terrible hungry. What is date? Chanting heard. Nualath, Nualath. What is this mean? When? Blood. Lots. It everywhere. Blood can't seep the screamin'. Too many screamin'. Mas 145-172-8812. Nualath Mualavor. Blood far Nualath. Kai Nualath. Blood far Nualath. Don dring der warta. That's the last entry in his diary. I don't know if it answers any of my questions or not. Did I end up here in a similar way? I wish I could remember what happened after I went to the toilet in the service station. One thing that worries me is the date. 1922. How long was Adler here? Day 20. I wasn't aware of falling asleep, though I do know that we talked for hours. I know what woke me, though. The storm had come, just as Rudy had said it would, and I had arrived at the shack in the valley just in time. Outside the shack was a maelstrom of wind, dust, and rain. I'd never seen anything like it. Down the valley, hundreds of small tornadoes swirled around, churning up the muck and water. Across the river and up onto the start of the rock plateau, I could see rain gushing sideways at an incredible speed. Odd, though, I could still see quite far, at least down into the valley where gargants hunkered down into the muddy water. Several of them were sitting there like massive, wet rock mounds, half submerged in the swamp. Dog Thing wasn't anywhere to be seen. I guessed that he had snuck off somewhere and found a shelter of his own. The shack was mostly untouched by the storm, tucked away as it was in the hollow of the rock face near the waterfall. The wind and the rain battered the walls, and I felt a bit wary that it might come crashing down on my head at any moment. Rudy must have sensed my concern.
This place has weathered hundreds of storms.
Okay, good. He sat down on the chair near the fireplace. Can ghosts actually sit? It would seem so.
Whoever built it certainly knew what they were doing. It may look like a pile of junk, but it's solid.
You didn't build it?
No, it was here before I arrived, pretty much as you see it now. I made a few repairs, but not a lot.
I spent most of the rest of the day having a poke around in the house, hunting around for useful stuff. Found more tools, including a rusty saw and a couple of hammers. I also moved my cart into the shack out of the storm and emptied it. Some of the scraps of wood I'd gathered stoked up the fire nicely, and I was able to dry everything out. The storm ended during the night. I awoke to silence. I even think it was the silence that woke me. Day 21. I found a hole. Not a normal hole. This is a little bit different. Well, the best description I have for it is a hole. I found it outside the hut after the storm, as I was trudging among the newly formed rock pools. Any crevice or recess in the rock that could hold water was filled up, and I was busy bottling as much of it as I could. I stood frowning at the hole for a few minutes, watching the water trickle out of it and down onto the ground to gather in one of the pools. Even if I empty the pools, it keeps refilling with the water from the hole. Doesn't sound strange, does it? No. But this hole is in mid-air. It's not in the rock or the ground. It's about 3 feet off it. Just sitting there? Holes don't sit, do they? Hanging there, even. Well, it's there anyway, and once the water finally stopped coming out of it, a beam of bright light lit up the pool. The light was coming out of the hole. Even stranger, it could only be seen from one side. When I walked round to the other side, there was nothing, only the light. But from the front, I could clearly see a hole. I went back to the hut and fetched a thin piece of wood, and then went back to the hole and stood gobsmacked as I poked the stick through it. Sure enough, it went into the hole and didn't appear on the other side. Fortunately, it didn't devour the stick as I pulled it back out again. If it had done that, I think I might have run screaming and hidden back in the shack.
Strange, aren't they?
It was Rudy. He was standing a few feet away. What the hell is it? He shrugged.
Well, a hole, I guess. I've never been able to figure out what they are, only that they appear for a short time after the storms and gradually disappear.
Weird as hell.
Yes, very much so. Adler used to turn into a nervous mess when those things appeared. He swore that he came here through one of them.
Seriously?
Yes. I'm not calling him a liar, but I've never seen one big enough to fit a man through.
We talked as we walked back up to the shack. How did you get here, Rudy? He was quiet for what seemed a long time before speaking again.
I'm not entirely certain, but I know that I had been assaulted. Back in the old world, in the area that I lived, there was a gang of what is best described as rich thugs, high earners in the city, some people said, who had a hobby of going into the slums and making sport on those who could do little to defend themselves. They did some quite awful things. I was quite used to avoiding them usually. They'd turn up every now and then in the middle of the night in their fancy cars. They would grab someone and take them somewhere out of the way and, well, you can imagine the rest. One night I was asleep and didn't hear them coming.
We arrived back at the shack and sat down on the rocks outside. Rudy continued.
The whole experience is hazy, but I do remember something interrupting them, something terrible. I remember being picked up by people who I couldn't see. They were different people, and not the gang. I was stunned or concussed, I think. They took me. I woke up in the ruins across the swamp. That's about all I can remember.
They didn't tell you where you were?
They weren't there when I awoke.
But the zombies, you said they are all over the ruins.
Yes, they are now. They weren't so much back then. At least I don't remember seeing any. I eventually found this place after being scared out of my wits by the Gargants.
Rudy was quiet for most of the evening. I settled into one of the chairs in the shack and read bits of some of the magazines and books. Day 22. Dog Thing was back. I didn't spot him immediately. He was sitting on the top of a rock across the river watching me. This time he wasn't alone. I was so pleased at seeing him again that it took me a while to even notice the others. It was only when one of them stood up, stretched, and then sat back down that I saw them. They were huddled together under a rocky outcropping about halfway up towards the plateau, 4 of them watching me.
You seem to have gathered more followers.
Rudy was standing in the doorway to the shack. You think they are safe?
Yes. Look, there's something I need to tell you about. I'm guessing that you are planning to head out again soon.
I thought about it. It hadn't occurred to me since arriving at the shack, but I couldn't stay there forever. That would never get me home. Yes, I have to move on at some point.
Understood. Well, you need to be wary of someone in this place. Someone very dangerous.
More dangerous than Gargants and zombies?
Yes, much more. He is called Cutter Jack. At least, that's how I know him.
Odd name.
Yes, you asked about who it was that killed me, and I was weary about voicing my thoughts about it at the time, but I believe it is he who killed me down by the river. I've only ever seen him once, and that was a long time ago. I was in the city ruins fighting the zombies there while scavenging. It was before I met Adler, and at the time I was relieved to see someone else, but he came at me brandishing knives, long, sharp ones, the same ones I'd seen him killing zombies with. I ran, but he was too fast, and caught me up, cornering me in one of the ruins, cursing and ranting, spitting at me.
And he killed you?
No, at least not that time. That was our first encounter, and it was the maw that saved me then. They came out of the shadows and chased him off. There were many of them, a dozen even. I haven't seen that many maw since then.
Sounds like a nasty piece of work.
He is. I call him he. I don't know. Maybe a creature.
How did you know its name?
Adler, oddly enough. I mentioned him to the professor once, and he sang me a song about a character called Cutter Jack. I've no idea where the song came from, but the name stuck. Just be wary and hope your maw sticks with you. I think it was Cutter Jack that caught me down by the river when I was alone.
Oh, I see.
Well, I'd not seen him for years after that, but every now and then when I was wandering, scavenging and stuff, I'd come across a zombie that had been slaughtered. So Cutter Jack was still around somewhere.
New things to note. Swamp pods do taste like potatoes, if a bit mustardy. Dog Thing and his friends don't like pod. The other maw look different to Dog Thing. Each has its own distinct look. I've named one of them Mo. She has a tuft of hair, a little like a mohawk, running along her back. It's bright green. Very odd. She has brighter eyes. I don't know if she is a she, but she looks somehow more feminine than the others. The hole has gone. Day 23. I'd been hanging around the shack since I arrived. This morning I decided it was time to have a look round nearby, so I grabbed the lantern and my makeshift rucksack. I swapped a few things around and added a few tools and some water bottles, and then headed out. But not down towards the swamp and the gargants. That would have been stupid. Instead, I wandered up into the rocks and the hill behind the shack, hoping to find some trace of Adler's camp. I could only get a few 100 feet further up the rock behind the shack before it became too steep to climb. I was about to give up searching for the outcrop of rock that Rudy had mentioned, the professor's camp, when I noticed the rope hanging down 20 or so feet from me. It was dangling there, hanging in the darkness. I climbed over the rocks towards it and looked up. In the gloom above, I could barely make out what might be the outcrop of rock. It didn't look very big, and there was at least a 50-foot climb upwards. Without the rope, I would never have been able to get that high, not without some seriously hard work. It took me 20 minutes to pull myself up. There was a cave about 30 feet deep cutting into the rock, ending in loose rubble, and it was there that I found some of the remains of Professor Adler's camp. There wasn't a lot left. Just a mattress and a blackened fire pit that was long abandoned. How the hell had Adler got a mattress up here? I had struggled to get up there by myself, and from Rudy's description, Adler had been a lot older than I. I doubt he would have been able to put the rope up there, so it had to be there already. I wish he was still here. So many questions. Stranger still was where the rope had been attached. Poking out of the floor was a metal hoop about 2 inches thick. It was attached to the rock by a heavy metal panel and bolts. I was about to light up the lantern to have a look at the back of the cave when I noticed that there was light coming from somewhere already. Somewhere at the back of the cave was a faint glow of a different color to all the other lighting in this place. Not quite so unnatural. I left the unlit lantern on the ground near the entrance of the cave with my rucksack next to it, and walked cautiously into the darkness until I reached the bottom of the rubble, still unable to see where the light was coming from. At the top of the rubble I found my answer. The rocks weren't the back of the cave. A small gap about 2 feet high gave way to darkness. Darkness, except for a single perfect line of light on the ground somewhere below. I couldn't judge the distance. A few minutes later, and I was back up at the gap with my rucksack over my shoulders and the lantern lit. The light from the lantern revealed what turned out to be a corridor below. I say a corridor because it was definitely not natural. All along the walls hung chunks of cracked plaster. The ground was littered with the stuff as well as a heap of other junk. Bits of paper, magazines, empty tin cans, another burnt-out campfire, and a pile of mattresses. Maybe the mattresses had already been up here? It took me a few minutes to negotiate my way down the rocks without injuring myself. I put the lantern smack in the middle of the corridor to get as much light on the area as I could. It was about 40 feet long, straight into the rock. There was a filing cabinet lying on its side, the drawers pulled out and full of yet more junk. Nothing worth taking, though. The corridor ended abruptly in a flat wall of solid rock. No plaster on this wall, only smooth, carved rock. Dead in the middle of the back wall was the source of the light. A door. There was no handle, no lock, no hinges, or any other visible sign of opening it. Only the solid metal door covered in scratches and dents, like someone had tried many times to get through it. At the bottom of the door was a thin crack no more than a couple of inches high, and light was shining from it. As I said before, this wasn't the same light as any I'd seen in this place so far. It was more natural and startlingly bright. I got to my knees and squinted, trying to make out something through the gap. I was greeted by a fresh, cold breeze. Not damp, not musty or humid. Fresh air. I breathed deep and filled my lungs with it as I squinted harder against the glare, still desperate to see what might be on the other side of the door. After a minute or so, my eyes adjusted enough to be able to vaguely see. Long days of being in this dark place had changed my vision, I guess. Enough that the sunlight, and it had to be sunlight, hurt my eyes. After more than 3 weeks in this dark place, I caught a glimpse of somewhere else, somewhere that lay beyond a seemingly unopenable door, a small slice of another place. I could see grass, and among the grass was a single white flower dancing in the breeze. Day 24.
You may as well stop now.
It was Rudy sitting on the filing cabinet watching me. I stopped hammering. I'd already broken one of the 2 hammers I found in the house. I'd even tried prying the rusty saw into the thin gap underneath the door, but there wasn't enough leverage to cut. That knackered old thing was never going to cut metal anyway. I stood for a moment, peering at him, and then realized he had known about the door all along.
We tried, me and Adler. He was more persistent than I, but in the end he gave in as well. It's at least 6 inches thick, that door. I guess that's what drove him away in the end. I think he went a bit bonkers, realizing that the only way out of here that we'd found was only a few 100 yards away, and we didn't have the means to open it.
Why didn't you tell me it was here? It's daylight out there.
Yes, it is. But daylight where?
I dropped the hammer and sat down on the hard stone floor, catching my breath. What do you mean? Rudy shrugged.
Do you know where we are any more than I do? It's alien enough down here without stepping out into daylight. Is that our world up there?
I don't know, but you still could have told me why Adler really made his camp up here.
Yes, I could have told you. Should have, maybe. I'm sorry.
How long was he up here? Rudy shrugged again.
Probably months. I don't know. If I'm honest with you, I didn't discover it. Adler did. I was here at the shack for a long time, years even before Adler, and I never found the door. I mean it. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to waste the stupid amount of time we did, Adler and I, trying to pry the damn thing open. I was hoping to save you from that.
We sat in silence for a while. There's no lock, no door handle, no hinges.
No. Whoever put it there to keep what's in here locked away, I guess.
And it's the only way out?
Yes. Well, as far as I know, I guess that Adler may know by now if there is. That's what he left to find. I certainly haven't found any other way.
And you never went with him? It was a statement more than a question.
No, I don't know why I didn't. If I'm honest, I wish I had. I've wished that so many times since then.
Why didn't you take off after him?
Fear, I guess.
I sat for a while, looking round at the door, the junk strewn around the place, and Rudy. How long have you been here at the shack, Rudy? I mean, how long before you died? He was quiet for a while.
I don't know how long since I've been dead. I haven't been able to make the marks on the calendar for so long.
The calendar? He shook his head and sighed.
Come with me.
I collected my things, including the broken hammer, just in case I could fix it, blew out my lantern, and then we made our way over the rubble and back down the rope. I was surprised to see Rudy still climb down the rope. I don't know if he had to, being a ghost and all, but he still did it. He took me to the back of the shack, and there he showed me something that I hadn't noticed in the couple of days I had been there. I hadn't thought to look behind it. At the back of the shack was a 15-foot gap, before a sheer wall about 8 feet high. It spanned the entire length of the shack and was covered with a makeshift lean-to made of corrugated metal and wood, much like the rest of the shack.
You'll need your lantern, or see if one of the ones in the box over there still works.
I took a quick look in the box near the arched entrance, and took my own lantern out of my pack and lit it. The light flickered for a moment, and then glowed brightly as I turned the gauge to get as much light as possible. Across almost the entire back wall of the lean-to, scratched into the rock, was Rudy's calendar. Row after row of small marks in bunches of 6, and then crossed through the middle. Every so often there was a small letter carved between the marks. JFMAMJJASOND, and then a few marks after the D came a number. Months, and the numbers were years. My heart jumped a little when I saw the last number with only 3 scratched marks after it. 31. You were here for over 30 years?
Yes, 31 years, as it says. I don't know how many passed after my death, though. It's hard to keep count when you can't make a mark anymore, and since I don't sleep, it's just been one long day to me.
You could still leave, though. Leave this place and look for Adler, look for a way out. Nothing could hurt you either. He shook his head.
No, unfortunately, it seems I'm stuck here, and when you go, I will remain here still.
How do you know that? He sat down on a stump of wood that was leaning against the rock wall.
I've tried. Many times I've tried. I get as far as the bottom of the plateau or down to the foot of the hill where the river from the waterfall meets the swamp where the pods grow, and I can go no further.
I traced my hand across the lines etched into the wall. It was almost like reading Braille. Not that I could read Braille, but it was how I imagined it would be. Except this calendar had taken him 31 years to write. How? Why can't you go any further?
I don't know. It gets harder to move the further I am away. Then, at a certain distance, I can no longer move any further forward. It's like being held by a giant leash that won't stretch any further.
From what? Where's the middle? Have you tried to find out what's stopping you?
Yes, I'll show you.
We left the calendar room, and I followed him down towards the river, across the small rock bridge, and over to the other side.
That.
He's pointing at his body.
It seems that I cannot travel far from the spot where I died, and even worse, I can't see any further than my prison.
How so? He looked up and over towards the swamp.
What do you see when you look that way?
I followed his gaze. I see the river and the swamp, the gargants over there, a line of pods on the river bank, and then more swamp.
Yes, well, I can see where the river ends, but only a few feet of the swamp. I can see up to the cave, but I can no longer see out of the door and into the light. Darkness like a fog is all I see, even when I stand right up close to it.
As Rudy was talking, something flashed in the dim light, a glimmer of some kind shining off something on the ground. I crouched down and reached into the grass. It was metal, a chain or a necklace, but most of it was buried under the soil.
What have you found?
I don't know, a chain of some kind. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find to dig with, one of my knives, and dug the chain out of the ground. It was a necklace, silver or steel. Dangling from the end of it was a compass. It seemed that Rudy couldn't contain his joy.
It's my compass! I thought it was lost.
I cleaned off the dirt and held it up so I could see it more clearly. As I turned the compass round, the hand moved. It still worked. The hand pointed out over the swamp and past the gargants.
Please, can I see it?
I held it up so that Rudy could look. He reached out, but his hand passed through it. He looked disappointed.
Will you keep it for me? Will you bring it to the shack?
Of course. I was tired. Climbing the rope and hammering at that door had worn me out. We settled back into the shack, and I got the fire going. As I sat reading aloud some of Professor Adler's early memoir entries, Rudy stood gazing at his compass hanging on an old nail jutting out of the wall. Day 25. It's been a long day, and I have a lot to write. Right now I'm hunkered down in what appears to be the cellar of a ruined building. It's dark down here. I've got the lantern turned down as low as possible to conserve the fuel, just bright enough to be able to write. I can see the faint glow that Rudy emanates coming from the stairway. It's strange to think that so much has changed in a few hours, and I still can't think what it might have been that caused it all. I'd been asleep, overtired from climbing up into the cave. The noise that woke me made me jump up from my sleeping place near the fire, and my heart was pounding. Rudy was there, peeping out of a small hole in the wall. Outside, what could only be described as a war was raging. The screams and groans of the zombies were almost deafening, though not as loud as the growling and the howls from the maw. I fumbled around and finally found where my mace lay, grabbed it, and ran for the door. Rudy yelled at me not to go.
Don't! It's too dangerous!
But I was acting on gut instinct and ignored him. Instead, I flung the door open and stepped outside. Zombies everywhere, hundreds of them, littered across the ground, all the way from the river to the house were the torn remains of dozens of the things. The maw darted backwards and forwards, bringing down zombie after zombie and tearing them to shreds. The zombies seemed strangely oblivious to the demon dogs and were mindlessly intent on getting up the hill to the shack. I know that I didn't need to join in, but something told me that my new friends were defending me, and I couldn't let them do it alone. I ran down the hill, the mace raised ready, my common sense screaming at me to stop and go back. I charged the nearest zombie that wasn't being munched on by one of the maw. Crunch, splat. That was the noise, as well as I could describe it. I swung the mace, this time not throwing my whole weight into it, as I had my first encounter. I'd learned a clumsy lesson that day, and wasn't going to make the same mistake again. The zombie barely saw me coming, but I swore there was a brief moment of recognition before I smacked the thing across the side of the head. I was hoping that I could take one down if I wasn't as clumsy and tried to aim, but I wasn't expecting to end it so quickly. The creature's head exploded, its body lurched sideways with the force of the blow and hit the ground hard. I didn't have time to rejoice my victory, though. 2 other zombies were stumbling towards me, and I didn't know if it was hunger or hatred in their eyes. One of the zombies only had one eye left, but I swear that eye hated me. 3 swings of my mace later, and they were both down. I hadn't hit the first of the pair hard enough, and had to draw back, take a step away, and swing again. The second fell to my first blow, and with a flash of green fur, I saw Mo jump upon it. She dragged it away from me and tore its throat out before I could even judge whether I'd killed it. I backed further up towards the shack, gave the maw some space to do what they do best, and I waited, taking out any odd zombies that managed to get past them. Half an hour. That's about how long I think the battle had taken before every zombie was down. I'd killed 20 of them, and the maw had killed countless numbers, possibly hundreds. Some of them still crawled, still tried to carry on, and as I moved around with the maw, watching them finish off those that hadn't died, a horrible realization struck me. They hadn't been heading towards the shack at all. They had been trying to get to me. Somehow I had become a target again. After my flight from my first camp, the few zombies that I had seen during my brief stay at the bus had ignored me. Now this was no longer the case. They had come there for me. Rudy was waiting at the door to the shack, looking worried.
"Are you okay? What will you do now?"
I don't know. I sat down, breathing heavily, and watched the maw as they milled around and prodded at the bodies of the zombies. Why do they want me, do you think?
"I have no idea. I've never known them to bother anyone. They are usually mindless and only focused on wherever it is they are going. I've never had one of them even register that I was there, even when I was not far away."
Somehow they seem to have noticed me.
"Yes. For some reason you bother them."
I sat and thought for what seemed a long time. The maw eventually calmed and wandered back to their rock hollow near the plateau. I don't know if I can stay here, not if they are going to keep coming here. But is anywhere safe from them? Will they follow me wherever I go?
I don't know.
We wandered down the river and a little way to the swamp, but not all the way down. Rudy looked out over the swamp and nodded at the gargants.
"They will notice the bodies of the zombies soon and will come to consume them."
Rudy's expression changed. I was watching him when it happened, and it was like a sudden epiphany. Is that the right word?
"I can see further."
What? He was shaking. Should ghosts shake?
I can see further than I could before, across the swamp. I only just realized I haven't seen across the swamp for years, but I can now."
He looked at me, visibly shocked, then looked out over the plateau.
"I can't see the plateau or the rope up to the cave. It's all darkness."
He looked as puzzled as I. He moved quickly across the river and walked toward the rocks below the plateau, then came back.
"I don't understand. Something has changed. The area of my prison has moved about 100 yards.
I shrugged, unable to help.
"It was centered on my body before. Now it seems to have moved to the shack."
We both guessed at the same time. The compass. Rudy laughed.
"All this time, I thought that I was trapped forever to haunt the spot where I was killed. It wasn't the case at all. The compass."
"That means you can come with me."
"What?"
"You can come with me when I leave." That took a moment to sink in.
"Of course. Yes, I can, can't I?"
"I just have to keep the compass with me. Of course, it's up to you."
I wish to come, leave this place. I've been stuck here so long that I can't even remember what other places look like anymore.
I started back up towards the shack. Then it's decided, isn't it? We leave. Rudy caught up with me.
When? When do we go?
I could sense the anticipation in him now. He was bursting to get out of here, and I was glad. I'd been too safe at the shack, too comfortable. All the water and food I needed and a roof over my head for a few days had made me complacent. I'd been putting off leaving because I was getting used to feeling less lost. Now. We go now. It has to be. If we wait, then I might start doubting. We went into the shack, and I started gathering as much up as I could. Rudy hovered around. I could sense he was itching to help me pack, but obviously couldn't.
Which way will we go?
I don't know. I don't want to go backwards, not back to the bus or the scrapyard. We can't get that door open, so that's not an option. Across the swamp, maybe?
Rudy shook his head at this. Too dangerous. There are far too many Gargans out there and no shelter for miles. But if that's the way you want to go, we can go around.
I stopped packing and looked at him. Didn't you say that round the swamp was the zombie path?
We can go the other way round, up into the rocks on the other side along from here. It may look sheer, but there are numerous paths and some ruined buildings dotted here and there. At least until we reach the city. It's the way I came here all those years ago.
Sounds good.
After that, when we reach the city ruins, we're into new territory, though. I don't know the way after that.
We deal with that when the time comes. An hour later, and we were on our way. And what a strange bunch of travelers we made. I pushed the cart, which was full of everything I'd brought with me so far, and a heap of stuff from the shack. Everything I thought I could push in the cart that may be useful. Beside me walked Rudy, a ghost, his face beaming with a smile I hadn't seen since I met him. Around us, circling, hopping from rock to rock and sniffing at everything we passed, were the maw. I had wondered if they would follow us, or if it would be only dog thing. When we left, it was 5 maw, but by the time we got to the ruined building with the cellar, 3 more had joined us. I don't even remember seeing them arrive. They were just there with the others, scouting ahead of us and watching our backs, constantly guarding. So here I am, camping down in the cellar, writing this by the faint light of the lantern before I go to sleep. Rudy has become my watchman. It's strange that he doesn't sleep. I guess ghosts don't need to. He seems quite happy with the idea of sitting there all night watching out for me. I heard the maw moving occasionally, but mostly I think they are huddled together in the ruined building above me. Before I go to sleep, I'm going to tell you about one other thing. Something I found down here in the cellar. It's written on the wall in charcoal or black chalk, and I didn't notice it until I'd already eaten and set out my bedding. I turned the lantern up brighter so that I could read it. It says, "Cutter Jack, Cutter Jack, he knows where your throat is at. Listen out and watch your back. Slice you, dice you, little rat." It's signed underneath, Adler. Day 26.
They've gone.
Rudy was sitting at the bottom of the steps when I awoke. Took me a few moments to catch up, clear my head, and realize where I was. Who? Gone? He nodded towards the stairs leading out of the ruined cellar.
The maw.
I sat up pretty quick at that, then stood up and walked towards the stairs. My body ached again. First night out sleeping rough again, I guess. I gotten far too used to the mattress in the shack. All of them? Dog Thing was still there. He was sitting up on top of one of the broken walls that ringed the building, scratching away happily. The ruins of the building suggested that it had once been a house of some kind. It reminded me of the walls they dug up in that TV program. What was it called? Time Team. I loved that program. Hippie archaeologists in a hurry. Rudy was close behind me.
Only him left. The rest seemed to have gone. I didn't even notice them go. and I've been sitting out here all the time you were asleep."
I don't know what it was that I felt. Fear, maybe. It wasn't pleasant. Strange. I was kind of getting used to them being around. Rudy laughed.
"Yes, me too."
I went back down into the cellar and started packing up my stuff. Most of it was still in my sack, and I had left some of it up in the cart. 10 minutes later, and we were ready to leave. Then I realized that I wasn't even sure where I was heading. I hoped that Rudy might have some idea. "So, where now?"
"You're asking me? Well, apart from that rhyme down the cellar, we don't have a lot to go on, do we?"
"Nope, not a lot. I guess we head down into the city?"
"Well, it's dangerous down there from what I remember. Zombies, Cutter Jack, and who knows what else."
I climbed up onto one of the rocks downhill from the ruin and sat down on the top. Rudy appeared next to me, though I don't remember him climbing. From my perch on top of the rock, I could see quite a distance down into the valley, even though it was, as always, dark. The darkness seemed more like a fog and less like pitch black. Dotted throughout the ruins were small clusters of light, though I couldn't make out what it was that the light was coming from. It was enough to get a rough idea of the layout of the buildings and streets. It wasn't as vast as I had imagined it would be. Rudy had called it a city, or was it the city? I expected it to be bigger.
"Oh, well, I guess it's not the size of a city like London or Birmingham. I must admit I don't remember. It was always Adler that called it the city. I suppose he named it that."
"Did he go there much?"
"Yes, quite a lot. He became quite the scavenger and explorer over the years. Most of what we had in the shack was scavenged by Adler from those ruins. I never did get to ask him how far he actually traveled. He was always up in his camp or in the shack before I went to sleep. He said that the city was a gold mine of useful junk."
"He must have traveled fast to get here and back in a day."
"He did have his bicycle."
"The bicycle, of course. I had forgotten that the professor wasn't on foot." "Well, trying to find some trace of his passage might be a place to start, do you think?" Rudy was frowning.
"Yes, I think so. If there is anyone who has an idea of what else might be out there, it would be him. That is, if anyone does."
"He may still be there for all we know." I was only hoping against hope, of course. I knew as well as Rudy that the professor would probably be long gone, but maybe there would be some trace of him staying there, or some clue somewhere of where he might have headed. It had been a long time, though, from what Rudy said, years even. Adler could well be miles away, hundreds of miles. He could be dead, a pile of bones somewhere. Or another ghost? I couldn't think of a better plan, though. I knew that I had to keep going, even if it meant the risk of bumping into zombies or this Cutter Jack person. For the next couple of hours we traveled down the hill, negotiating our way through the rocks. The cart was becoming a bit of a hindrance, now that the ground was more uneven. I hoped that when we got down into the city, that the roads or paths would be easier ground. I was down to 4 bottles of petrol for the lantern now, and thanks to the river near the shack, 20 bottles of water. I still had a dozen torches and a whole heap of dried pods left, even some of the mushrooms. Light was becoming less of a problem now, and most of the time we traveled in the dark. My eyes seemed to be adjusting even more to it as each day passes, and neither Dog Thing nor Rudy seemed to have a problem seeing. Am I going to end up with strange, bright, googly eyes like Dog Thing, like that Gollum creature from The Hobbit? We eventually made it down onto the flat ground in the edge of the city. The layout was the strangest thing I'd seen in a while. It wasn't like any other settlement I'd seen. It was almost like someone took a big old chunk of London and dumped it here. There was no build-up of smaller buildings or suburbs like every other town or city I'd ever been to. The road where we first entered the ruins just started right next to the first building, cobbles and all. Yes, real cobbles. They made the cart almost impossible to push. I don't know why I was expecting a modern city or even vaguely recent buildings. As we had traveled down through the rocks towards the looming buildings, I'd had a chance to get a rough layout of the place. The slope we were traveling down was quite steep, and we had been at least a few 100 feet above the city when we started down the rough track. There were only 4 streets in each direction, all crossing like a grid, like the blocks in New York. But this place was nowhere near as new. I'm not much of an expert on old buildings, but I'd have said that they were a few 100 years old, and most of them looked like they hadn't collapsed over the years. To me, they looked like they had been bombed. Dotted here and there along the pavement were clumps of glowing grass, like up near the shack. It gave the streets an eerie alien feel. Most of all, I noticed how quiet it was. We walked up the first street with Dog Thing following us a few feet behind. He was alert, I could tell. I've somehow gotten used to reading some of his behavior, and he was jitterish, on edge. The street was called Charleston Way. The sign was rusty and hanging off a broken post that looked like something had smashed into it. I struggled over the cobbles and hauled the cart up onto the pavement. It was littered with piles of rubble and junk, but the slabs made it flat enough that the cart moved over it easily enough. We headed towards the middle, passing run-down shops and flats. I glanced into one of the shop windows, through a hole in the glass. I could vaguely make out what might have been shelving and display cabinets, but it was too dark in there to get a proper look.
"Hold up!"
Rudy peered through the window. "Did you spot something?"
"I don't know. Maybe just junk, but you never know. Might be something in there."
I pulled the cart up alongside the door to the shop and grabbed the lantern. It only took a few seconds to light it. I was getting quite quick at it now. I grabbed the mace and used the sharp, nasty end to push the front door open. The door fell off. I'd barely touched it, the lightest prod, but it was enough to send the door off its hinges and crashing down with a loud bang. Dust flew everywhere. A huge cloud of it billowed upwards until it made a signal that would be visible for miles, if anything could see for miles. Dog Thing ran. He was 50 yards down the street before he stopped and sat down to watch me from a safe distance. Crap. I didn't want to do that. No, maybe not, said Rudy from behind me. Big, deep sigh. Well, that kind of settles it then. If there's anyone here, they know now we are.
Or a thing. I'll keep lookout here, said Rudy.
I stepped over the collapsed door and shone the lantern into the shop. Most of the dust had gone outside, so I could still see clearly. Strewn across the floor were empty tin cans and ripped boxes. I picked up one of the boxes nearest me. It was torn and covered in dark, moldy stains. Weetabix. Empty. Damn. It was the same along every row, counters full of ripped and damaged packaging that was either empty or had contents that I wouldn't have touched even if I was starving. Then I reached the back of the shop. There, on what looked like the shop counter, right next to a smashed-up cash till, was a cardboard box with cans of tinned food carefully stacked into it. I emptied it out onto the counter to see how big a find it was. Peaches, beans, stewed steak, mushy peas. There were a few of each type of can, all unopened and seemingly undamaged. Bingo! I packed the tins into the box again and walked round the back of the counter, all the time wondering who would leave a box of food tins lying around. Maybe someone had packed them and meant to take them away, but for some reason hadn't been able to. Not a comforting thought. Then I found out why they were still there. There was a door at the back of the counter, this one also hanging off its hinges. There was a light coming from inside and a noise that sounded like wasps swarming, or flies. Masses of them buzzed around. The room was only small, but the devastation was huge. Whatever had happened in there had happened quite recently, like within a few days or a week at most. It was all disgustingly fresh. Blood was scrawled all over the walls and collected in little congealed pools across the floor. Scattered here and there were the remnants of someone or something, chunks of bones and flesh and other stuff that I couldn't identify, didn't want to identify. In the corner, a small electric lamp lay on the floor, plugged into some kind of battery. It was still on. Then the smell hit me. I stepped out of the room and threw up all over the counter. I felt my heart rate screaming and panic about to take over. "Rudy!" He was already there. "Oh, my God!" It took me a minute or so to regain control of my faculties, hanging off the side of the shop counter with my head spinning and my stomach lurching. This was recent, wasn't it? I looked up. Rudy was standing in the doorway, staring at the mess. "Do you think it was a person?"
"Had to be."
I turned away. I couldn't look at it again. Zombie bits were one thing, but a real person I couldn't handle.
"Wait, though. No."
Rudy had gone into the room.
"The skin, it's not human skin. It's like lizard skin. It's all scaly."
That brought me to my senses. It wasn't a person. I walked back to the door and stepped inside. Rudy was kneeling down near the back corner of the room. The stench was terrible. He pointed at a piece of the body, and when I took a closer look, I could see exactly what he meant. Not only was the skin not human, but what I was looking at was the jaw of a lizard or cat-like creature. What the hell was it? Rudy stood up and left the room. I followed him.
"There are more than zombies, gargants, in the maw here. Hadler always said there was. Come to think of it, he claimed he had seen the maw, like your dog thing, fighting against another creature that was slightly larger and covered in gray-colored scales, like a maw, but not hairy."
"I see. Well, that looks grayish, doesn't it? I can't tell with all the blood."
"Yes, like a lizard scale, even."
It was then that I noticed the footprints. I hadn't seen them when I was searching the shop. I guess I had been too busy checking what was on the shelves to take any notice of the floor. Starting from the carnage room behind the counter and running straight in line towards the entrance were bloody footprints, human footprints. There were also other footprints that might have been paws, lots of them. Someone had run out of the place after the lizard thing had been killed. Someone in a hurry, and they might have had Ma with them, or chasing them. I followed the footprints out of the shop and further along the street, but they soon disappeared on the wet cobbles 20 yards along the street. They ended in the middle of a street crossing right next to a manhole cover. The paw prints split off and went in all directions. Rudy was right behind me, as was Dog Thing, who seemed to be over his scare from the noise of the collapsing door. "Do you think—" Rudy's eyes shone in the dim glow. They said exactly what I was thinking.
"They escaped."
"Yes."
"Whoever it was that was in that room managed to slaughter that lizard thing and then escape this way."
"Chased by the maw? Or maybe more of the lizard cat things? I'm not much of a tracker. Wasn't in the scouts when I was a kid." Rudy stood frowning at the manhole cover and then back at me.
"You're not seriously thinking of going down there, are you?"
I shrugged. "There's a chance of finding someone else, someone alive, and recently here. I can't ignore it."
"Oh, crap," Rudy sighed. "You have no idea what's down there. It could be crawling with God knows what, zombies, and, well, there are a lot of other dangerous things in this place that I can't even begin to describe."
"You think I shouldn't look?" Rudy was pacing the ground now.
"I'm not saying that. Just, well, you only have that spiked stick, and whatever went down there—"
"Whoever went down there."
"Whoever, then. You don't know that it's a person. Could be a zombie. It could be Cutter Jack."
I nodded. I'd forgotten about Cutter Jack. Don't ask how, I just had. "It could be Adler." We set up for the next night in one of the buildings across from the shop, hoping that whoever had gone down the manhole might come back up again at some point. Then we could check them out at a distance. Rudy was on watch again as I spent the rest of the day searching the half-dozen other derelict shops on the street. Found a box of cigarettes, 10 packets. They're a bit dry, and they don't smell so good, but I tried one, and they smoke pretty well. Guess I'm not the fussiest of people these days. I'd forgotten that I had run out. I guess I've been trying to avoid thinking about it, but I think I had my last smoke sitting under the 10-feet-tall mushroom in the rain, back before I crossed the plateau. It seemed as good a place as any. Something strange was bothering me as I thought of my last cigarette moment. Something niggling in the back of my mind. I can't figure out what. I remember sitting there under that enormous mushroom,